The morning sun had not yet broken the horizon when Victoria Reeves arrived at range 400, 4:30 in the morning, the same time she had arrived for the past 287 days. The same ritual, the same unspoken prayer to men and women who would never answer. Her boots made soft impressions in the dew-soaked grass as she walked toward the firing line. The Barrett 2A1 rifle case felt heavier today. Or perhaps it was simply that after nearly a year of this morning pilgrimage, the weight of what she carried had finally begun to settle into her bones. 30 pounds of precision, engineered steel and carbon fiber. A rifle designed to reach out and touch someone at distances most people could not comprehend. A tool of her trade, a tool of her penance. The range stretched before her in the pre-dawn darkness. Empty, silent, exactly as she needed it to be. Camp Pendleton held thousands of Marines, but at this hour the world belonged to her alone. She set the rifle case on the shooting bench and opened it with practiced efficiency. Every movement deliberate, every motion a meditation. The Barrett gleamed dully in the pale light. 50 caliber, semi-automatic, capable of punching through engine blocks at 1,000 meters. Capable of ending human life at distances where the target remained a stranger. She had fired this rifle in anger more times than she cared to count. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen. 13 deployments across 8 years. 13 tours of putting crosshairs on human beings and making the universe a little smaller with each trigger press. She loaded 8 rounds into the magazine, one for each name, one for each ghost. Jake Chen. The first round slid home with a metallic whisper. Michael Miller. The second followed. David Rodriguez, third. Hassan al-Tamimi. Fourth, an Iraqi interpreter who had saved her life twice before someone decided his usefulness had expired. Rebecca Kowalski. Fifth, a medic who had run into fire to save others and never made it back. Yuri Petrov. Sixth, a Ukrainian contractor who had taught her half of what she knew about long-range wind reading. Sarah Williams. Seventh, a helicopter pilot who had extracted her team under impossible circumstances and paid for it with her life. Marcus Daniels. Eighth, the team leader who had believed in her when no one else would. 8 names, 8 souls, 8 rounds loaded each morning for the past 287 mornings. The ritual never changed. The names never faded. The weight never lessened. Victoria chambered the first round and settled behind the rifle. The stock pressed against her shoulder like an old friend or an old enemy. She had long since stopped distinguishing between the two. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. Muscle memory from a decade of training and 8 years of combat took over. This was the one place in the world where everything made sense. Behind a rifle, with a target downrange, with a mission to complete. The first target stood at 800 meters. She did not need to calculate. She had made this shot so many times that her body knew the holes before her brain finished processing them. Temperature 58 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity 72%, barometric pressure 29.92, altitude 150 feet above sea level, wind negligible at this hour. The mathematics ran through her mind in fractions of a second. Jake! She whispered his name. The trigger broke clean, 4.2 pounds of pressure, and the Barrett roared. The recoil drove into her shoulder with familiar brutality. 30 pounds of rifle pushing back against 130 pounds of woman. Physics and violence in perfect equilibrium. Through her scope, she watched the impact. Dead center, always dead center. She had not missed a shot on this range in 287 days. Some skills you could not unlearn, no matter how hard you tried. Some skills became curses disguised as blessings. The second target stood at 1,200 meters. She adjusted her elevation, calculated wind drift even though the morning air remained still. Michael. The second shot echoed across the empty range. Another perfect hit. Another name honored. Another ghost acknowledged. One by one, she worked through the 8 targets. 800 meters, 1,200, 1,600, 2,000, 2,400, 2,800, 3,200, 3,600 meters. Each shot a prayer, each impact a promise, each name a burden she refused to set down. The final shot was always the hardest, 3,600 meters, over 2 miles, a distance where the curvature of the Earth became a factor in the ballistic equation. A distance where she had to account for the Coriolis effect. The rotation of the planet itself influenced where her bullet would land. At 3,600 meters, The laws of physics became poetry written in lead and copper. She did not aim at a target for the final shot. There was no target at 3,600 meters on range 400. The maximum range of the facility ended at 2,800. But she aimed anyway, at a blank hillside, at nothing, at the ghost of a shot she had made 2 years ago in the mountains of Afghanistan. The shot that had ended her career as a contractor. The shot that had saved 12 lives and cost her everything that mattered. 3,658 meters, the exact distance. She had not forgotten. She would never forget. The mathematics for the shot at that distance bordered on insanity. Bullet drop of 923 inches, over 77 feet of vertical drop. The bullet would rise in its arc and then fall like a meteor. Wind drift calculations that required her to read atmospheric conditions at multiple altitudes. Temperature inversions. Mirage. The density of air at 8,000 feet elevation. Every variable mattered. Every number could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. She settled into position, controlled her breathing, found the natural respiratory pause between exhale and inhale, the moment where the body stilled, where the heartbeat became something she could time her trigger press around. This was the warrior's meditation, the sniper's prayer, the intersection of will and skill, and the willingness to deliver death at distances where the target would never hear the shot that killed them. Her finger took up slack on the trigger. 4 pounds, 4.5. The Barrett's trigger broke at exactly 4.7 pounds. She knew because she had measured it 1,000 times, because precision mattered, because when you killed people for a living, you learned to know your tools with an intimacy that most people reserve for lovers. The shot broke. The rifle thundered. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. The bullet arced away into the morning darkness. 3,658 meters away, nothing waited, no target, no enemy, just her memory of a Taliban commander who had been lining up a shot on a medical evacuation team. Just her memory of impossible mathematics solved in 3 minutes of frantic calculation. Just her memory of the longest shot she had ever made in the moment when she became something other than human, something colder, something necessary. The bullet impacted somewhere on that distant hillside. Probably, she would never know. The shot did not matter. Only the ritual mattered. Only the names mattered. Only the promise she made every morning to 8 people who could no longer hear her. Today, tomorrow, when is it enough? She spoke the words aloud to the empty range, her voice barely more than a whisper. When would she be allowed to stop? When would the ghost release her? When would she miss a shot and finally give herself permission to be done with all of this? To stop waking at 4 in the morning, to stop loading 8 rounds, to stop whispering names to the darkness. The answer never came. It never would. She knew that, had known it for 287 days. But she asked anyway, because asking was part of the ritual, because hope was a harder habit to break than any addiction. She began to pack her equipment. The Barrett broke down into its case with the efficiency of long practice. Scope covers, bolt removed, magazine cleared, every piece secured. The morning was not yet done, but her portion of it was complete. 8 shots, 8 names, another day of carrying what could not be set down. Movement caught her peripheral vision. A figure approaching from the range control tower. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the confident stride of someone who belonged here. Someone with authority. She tensed. The range was supposed to be empty at this hour. She had authorization from the base commander to use the facilities during off hours. Paperwork properly filed. Permissions properly granted. But paperwork did not always translate into acceptance. The man drew closer, older, late 40s or early 50s, weathered face that spoke of decades under the sun. He wore the uniform of a Navy senior chief. Combat ribbons covered his chest. Trident insignia marked him as a SEAL. Victoria recognized the posture, the way he carried himself. This was a man who had seen combat, a man who had done things he did not talk about, a man who had earned the right to walk with that particular combination of confidence and caution. He stopped 10 feet away, studied her, studied the rifle case, studied the targets downrange. His eyes were gray, cold, evaluating. She had seen eyes like that before, in mirrors, in the faces of other contractors, in the 1,000-yard stares of men and women who had crossed lines that most people never knew existed. "You are on a Marine base," His voice carried the gravel of too many years shouting over gunfire and helicopter rotors. Civilians need authorization. Victoria reached into her pocket, pulled out the laminated card, base commander's signature. Valid for 1 year. She held it up without speaking. Let the paperwork answer for return. Words were dangerous. Words created connections. Connections created obligations. She had learned to live without both. The SEAL studied the authorization. His expression did not change. He handed it back. Griffon Dynamics. He said it like a curse, like the name tasted bad in his mouth. Victoria understood. Contractors had a reputation. Mercenaries, soldiers of fortune, men and women who fought for money instead of flag. The reputation was not entirely unearned, but it was not entirely accurate either. Nothing ever was. You lost someone. She made it a statement rather than a question. She could hear it in his voice, see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands formed fists and then deliberately relaxed. Grief had a signature. Rage had a posture. She knew them both intimately. My son. The words came out flat, emotionless, the tone of a man who had said them too many times. One of your people could not tell friendly from hostile. I am sorry. She meant it. For whatever that was worth. She had lost people to contractor mistakes too. Blue on blue, friendly fire, the sanitized terms for the worst moments in warfare. When the enemy was not the one who killed you, when your own side pulled the trigger. I have lost people to contractor mistakes too. She continued. That is why I left. The SEAL studied her more carefully now. Reassessing, she could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, trying to reconcile her presence on his range at 4:30 in the morning with whatever prejudices he carried about civilian contractors. That shooting, he gestured toward the targets downrange. Where did you learn that? Mosul, Raqqa, Kandahar, 13 times over 8 years. The answer seemed to surprise him, or perhaps intrigue him. He pulled out binoculars from his cargo pocket, glassed the targets downrange. Victoria knew what he would see. 8 targets, 8 perfect center mass hits, groups that would make a competition shooter proud. Accuracy that spoke of thousands of hours of practice and hundreds of real-world applications. Prove it. The SEAL lowered his binoculars. Show me your best. I just did. You watched. 3,658 meters. The SEAL's voice carried something new now. Recognition. I read about that. Taliban commander. Coast Province. 2023. That was you. Victoria did not answer. Did not need to. The silence confirmed what the SEAL had already guessed. Show me. Right now. Maximum range on this facility. 2,800 meters. Prove you are not just another contractor with bought credentials. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, trying to understand what he wanted, why he cared, why a Navy SEAL was challenging a contractor on a Marine Corps range at Twin. But the why did not matter, only the how, only the doing. That had always been her gift, her curse, the ability to shut down every question and simply perform, to become the weapon, to let the mathematics and the muscle memory take over. She opened her rifle case. The SEAL watched, waiting, testing. The morning had grown lighter. Not full dawn yet, but enough illumination to see clearly. Temperature rising, humidity dropping, wind beginning to stir. All the variables changing, making the shot harder, making it real. She assembled the Barrett, loaded a fresh magazine. The SEAL said nothing, just watched with those cold gray eyes, evaluating every movement, every decision. Victoria pulled out her Kestrel 5700 Elite Weather Meter. Digital readout showing wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. The tool of the modern sniper. Technology that would have seemed like science fiction to the snipers of Korea. To men like her grandfather, who had made legendary shots with nothing but Kentucky windage and iron will. Wind, 8.5 miles per hour. 3 o'clock, gusting to 12. She spoke aloud, letting the SEAL hear her process. Temperature 62 degrees, humidity 68%, barometric pressure 29.89. 2,800 meters required different mathematics than 3,600. The bullet would not arc as high, would not be in flight as long, but it was still a distance where everything mattered, where a single miscalculation would send the bullet into dirt or air, where precision was the only thing that separated success from failure. She calculated in her head, ballistic coefficient 0.670 for the 647-grain M33 ball ammunition. Muzzle velocity 2,850 feet per second. The bullet would lose velocity as it flew. Drag and air resistance stealing energy with every foot of travel. By the time it reached 2,800 meters, the round would have slowed to subsonic speeds, would be tumbling slightly, would be at the mercy of every atmospheric variable. Elevation 394.8 minutes of angle. She made the adjustment on her scope, clicking the turret, each click precisely calibrated, each click representing 1/4 minute of angle. Each click, the difference between hit and miss. Wind drift. That was the killer at this distance. 8.5 miles per hour crosswind. But wind was never constant, never uniform. It changed with altitude, changed with terrain, changed with the whim of atmospheric pressure and temperature gradients. She studied the mirage downrange, the heat shimmer rising from the warming ground. Mirage told her things that instruments could not. Mirage showed her what the air was actually doing. Not what it was supposed to be doing, what it was. She made her calculation. Spin drift, 18.7 minutes of angle right. The bullet rotated in flight, clockwise from her perspective. That rotation caused drift to the right. Unavoidable. Physics, wind drift, 24.3 minutes of angle left. Net wind effect, 5.6 minutes of angle left. She adjusted her scope, turned the windage turret, counting clicks, making the mathematics real. 4 minutes of preparation. The SEAL watched every second, timing her, judging her, waiting to see if she was real or if she was another fraud, another contractor who talked a good game but could not deliver when it mattered. Victoria settled behind the rifle, pressed her cheek against the stock, found her spot weld, the exact position where her eye aligned with the scope, where the sight picture became clear and consistent. Muscle memory from 10,000 repetitions, from 1,000 combat shots, from every morning for 287 days. She controlled her breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, slow, deliberate, finding the rhythm, finding the pause, the moment between heartbeats where the body stilled, where human tremor ceased and the rifle became an extension of will. The shot broke clean, the trigger pressed smooth, the rifle thundered, recoil drove into her shoulder. The Barrett bucked, but she rode it, stayed in the scope, watched for impact through the magnified optic. 4.2 seconds of flight time, an eternity and an instant. The bullet arced across 2,800 meters of California morning, crossed over ravines and hills, passed through shifting air currents and temperature gradients, obeyed laws of physics that most people never considered. Gravity pulling it down, spin drift pushing it right, wind drift pushing it left, the Coriolis effect adding its subtle influence, the rotation of the Earth beneath a bullet in flight. Impact, dead center. The target jerked as 647 grains of copper-jacketed lead struck at over 1,000 feet per second. Still supersonic at launch, but subsonic on arrival. Still carrying enough energy to kill. Still accurate enough to matter. The SEAL raised his binoculars, studied the target, studied Victoria, lowered the binoculars. Who taught you that mathematics? That is not contractor training. My grandfather. Victoria began breaking down the rifle, returning it to its case. Marine sniper, Korean War, taught me before the Corps did. The SEAL's expression changed, subtle, but Victoria had learned to read micro-expressions, to see the shifts in posture and breathing that revealed what words concealed. What was his name? The SEAL's voice had shifted, less hostile, more curious. Gunnery Sergeant Robert Reeves, 1st Marine Division, 1950 to 1953. Bobby Reeves was your grandfather. The SEAL said it like a revelation, like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Victoria looked up from securing her rifle case, studied the SEAL more carefully now, trying to understand how he knew her grandfather. A Marine sniper from the Korean War, a man who had died when she was 12 years old, a man whose stories had shaped everything she became. You knew him. I was BUD/S classmate with his son. Your Uncle Thomas. Tommy talked about his dad constantly. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Tommy Reeves, Uncle Tommy, Navy SEAL Team 6, Killed in action in Mogadishu, 1993. Operation Gothic Serpent, Black Hawk Down. Victoria had never met him. He had died 3 months before she was born, but his ghost had haunted her childhood. His photograph on her mother's mantle, his trident insignia in a shadow box, his legend larger than life. Tommy Reeves died in Mogadishu. The seal continued. 1993, I was there. Different helicopter, different sector, but I was there. Victoria closed her eyes, opened them. The world had not changed, but something had shifted. This was no longer a random encounter. This was connection. This was lineage. This was the invisible web that bound warriors across generations. The SEAL extended his hand. Sergeant Major Daniel Cunningham. People call me Bull. SEAL Team 5. 30 years in. Retirement in 6 months. Victoria shook his hand. Firm grip. Calluses in the right places. The handshake of a man who had worked with his hands for decades. Who had held rifles and ropes in the weight of other men's lives. Victoria Reeves. Former Marine, then contractor. Currently unemployed and trying to figure out civilian life. Bull looked at her, really looked, seeing past the surface, past the civilian clothes and the contractor affiliation, seeing the lineage, the blood, 3 generations of warriors. Grandfather Bobby in Korea, Uncle Tommy in Mogadishu, Victoria in Iraq and Afghanistan, and Syria and Yemen. A family tree watered with blood and sacrifice. Your bloodline bled for this country before you were born. Bull's voice carried weight. Respect, something Victoria had not heard in her own voice for a very long time. Your grandfather earned a silver star at the Chosin Reservoir. Your uncle died trying to save a downed pilot, and you, 13 deployments, 3,658-meter combat kill. That is not just skill, that is legacy. Victoria did not know what to say. Words failed. They often did. She had learned to communicate through actions, through rifle shots and mission completions, through results rather than explanations. But this moment seemed to require something more, some acknowledgement of what Bull had offered. Recognition, respect, the currency of warriors. Thank you, it was inadequate, but it was honest. Sometimes honesty was all you had left. Bull studied her for a long moment, then reached into his cargo pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, unfolded it carefully. The paper showed signs of wear, of being carried and read multiple times. Victoria could see official letterhead, Department of Defense, Marine Corps Training Command. I need to show you something. Bull held the paper so Victoria could see it. This is a crisis brief, classified, but I am going to trust you because of who your grandfather was, because of what your uncle did, because of what I just watched you do. Victoria read. The brief was dense, technical, full of military jargon and statistical analysis. But the core message was clear. Scout Sniper School pass rates had collapsed, from 62% in 2010 to 34% in 2024. Combat effectiveness reports showed that snipers failing to adapt to near-peer threats, Russian tactics, Chinese doctrines, adversaries with advanced optics and counter-sniper capabilities. The training that had worked against insurgents was failing against professional militaries. The Marine Corps is preparing for Pacific Theater conflict. Bull pointed to a paragraph. We need snipers who can operate at extreme ranges against advanced opposition. But our training is still designed for counterinsurgency. We are teaching Marines to pass tests instead of win wars. Victoria handed the paper back. She understood the problem, had lived it. The difference between range shooting and combat shooting. The gap between perfect conditions and chaos. The failure of institutions to adapt as fast as warfare evolved. Why are you showing me this? Because I think you can help. Bull refolded the paper, returned it to his pocket. I watched you shoot. I know your record. 3,658 meters in combat, 13 deployments. Griffin Dynamics does not hire mediocre contractors. They hire people who can perform when everything is going wrong, when the perfect training scenario falls apart, when adaptation is the only thing between mission success and body bags. I am not military anymore. I know. Bull's voice was gentle, almost kind. But you know things our instructors do not. You have done things our training does not prepare for. And you carry ghosts that tell me you understand the cost of failure. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. Some wall she had built over 287 mornings. Bull had seen through her, seen past the competence and the accuracy and the professional distance, seen the 8 rounds, seen the ritual, seen the woman who came to a range at 4:30 in the morning because she could not figure out how to live any other way. What do you want from me? Come to Quantico. Bull said it simply, directly. Demonstrate your methods to our training cadre. If they are impressed, we talk about long-term involvement. If not, you have lost nothing but a few days. No commitment, no obligation. Just a chance to show what contractor experience can offer. Victoria looked away, looked at the targets downrange. 8 perfect hits. 287 days of perfect hits. Precision that meant nothing. Skill that served no purpose. A ritual that honored the dead but did nothing for the living. She thought about Jake Chen, his last words on that rooftop in Syria. Do not let them waste this. She had not understood at the time, had thought he meant do not waste his sacrifice. Do not let his death be meaningless. But maybe he had meant something else. Do not waste what you have learned. Do not waste your skills. Do not waste the hard-won knowledge purchased with blood and trauma and survivor's guilt. When? Her voice was barely audible. Next week. Bull seemed to sense her wavering, seemed to press his advantage gently. I will make the arrangements. Set up a demonstration. You show them what you can do. They decide if it has value. Simple. Nothing is ever simple. Number. Bull agreed, but some things are worth the complexity. Your grandfather taught you to shoot. The Marine Corps trained you to fight. Combat taught you to survive. Maybe it is time to teach others. Maybe that is what comes next. Victoria turned back to face him, looked into those gray eyes, saw something there she had not expected. Hope, not for himself, for her. This stranger who had known her uncle, who had recognized her grandfather's name, who had watched her shoot and seen past the mechanics to the person behind the rifle. Bull was offering her something, not a job, not an opportunity, something more fundamental, a reason, a purpose, a mission that did not end with 8 rounds and 8 whispered names. I will think about it. That is all I ask. Bull pulled out a business card. Plain white, black text, name, rank, phone number. Nothing fancy, nothing decorative. The card of a professional who had no need for embellishment. Call me when you decide. Or if you need anything, your grandfather would have wanted someone to look out for you. Tommy would have wanted the same. So that is what I am offering. No strings, no obligations. Just one warrior to another. Victoria took the card, held it carefully. The paper felt heavier than it should, weighted with implication, with possibility, with the terrifying prospect that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward she had not considered. That maybe the ritual did not have to be all there was. That maybe 8 names did not have to define the rest of her life. Thank you, Sergeant Major. Bull, he smiled slightly. Anyone who can shoot like that gets to use my name, and Victoria, for what it is worth. I think your grandfather would be proud of you. I think Tommy would be too. Not because of the shooting, because you are still here, still fighting, still trying to figure out how to live after war. That is harder than any combat shot. Believe me, I know. He turned and walked back toward the range control tower, moving with that same confident stride, leaving Victoria alone with her rifle case and her thoughts and a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She looked at the card, looked at the targets downrange, looked at the eastern horizon where the sun was finally breaking through, golden light spilling across the California hills. A new day beginning whether she was ready for it or not. The Barrett case sat at her feet. 8 rounds expended, 8 names honored, 288 days of ritual complete. But something had changed. Some small shift in the pattern, some crack in the wall she had built around herself. Do not let them waste this. Jake's words echoed in her memory. She had thought she understood, but maybe understanding took time. Maybe understanding required someone like Bull to show up at 4:30 in the morning and recognize not just what she could do, but who she was. Legacy, lineage. 3 generations of warriors trying to make sense of a world that kept demanding blood and sacrifice. Victoria picked up her rifle case, started walking toward her vehicle, an old RV parked at the edge of the lot, her home for the past year. Mobile, self-contained, ready to leave at a moment's notice, ready to run whenever staying became too hard. But today she did not leave. She sat in the driver's seat, engine off, windows down, Bull's business card on the dashboard, the morning growing brighter around her, Marines beginning to arrive for regular training hours, the base coming to life, the world moving forward with or without her participation. She thought about Quantico, about demonstration shoots and training cadres, and the possibility that what she knew might actually matter, might actually help, might give her a reason to load 8 rounds for something other than grief. She thought about her grandfather, Bobby Reeves, Silver Star recipient, chosen reservoir survivor, a man who had come home from Korea and spent the rest of his life teaching others, teaching his granddaughter, passing forward what he had learned, making sure the knowledge did not die with him. She thought about Uncle Tommy, Black Hawk Down, Gothic Serpent, a SEAL who had died trying to save others, who had believed some things were worth dying for, worth sacrificing for, worth giving everything for. 3 generations, 3 warriors, 3 different wars, but the same fundamental question. What do you do after the shooting stops? How do you take what war taught you and make it mean something? How do you turn killing skills into life-saving knowledge? Victoria reached for her phone, pulled up a new text message, typed in Bull's number from the business card, stared at the blank message field for a long time, trying to find words, trying to commit to something she was not sure she could deliver, trying to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still a reason to keep showing up. She typed 3 words, I am in, sent the message before she could change her mind, before doubt could creep back in, before the walls could rebuild themselves. The response came 30 seconds later. Good. Quantico, next Tuesday, 0600. Come ready to show them what real war looks like. Victoria set the phone down, looked at the targets downrange one more time. 8 perfect hits. 288 days of perfect hits. But maybe tomorrow she would load 9 rounds instead of 8. Maybe there was room for something new. Something that looked forward instead of backward. Something that honored the dead by keeping the living alive. She started the RV's engine, pulled out of the parking lot, drove past ranges and barracks and training facilities, past young Marines who had not yet seen combat, who had not yet learned what Victoria knew, who had not yet paid the prices she had paid. Maybe some of them never would. Maybe what she could teach would keep them alive, keep them from becoming ghosts who needed 8 rounds every morning. Keep them from loading magazines with names instead of missions. The road stretched ahead, California Highway 76, east toward the desert, toward wherever she would spend the next week preparing, toward Quantico and whatever waited there, toward the possibility that a contractor could teach Marines something worth learning, that a woman carrying 8 ghosts could help others avoid carrying their own. That legacy meant more than bloodline, that it meant passing forward what you learned, making sure the next generation had every advantage, every skill, every hard-won piece of knowledge purchased with trauma and survival, and the willingness to do what needed doing. Victoria Reeves drove into the morning sun, the Barrett case secured in the back, Bull's business card on the dashboard, 8 names whispered and honored, and for the first time in 288 days, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The ghost would always be there. Jake and Michael and David and Hejin and Rebecca and Yuri and Sarah and Marcus. They would never leave. She would never stop hearing their voices, never stop seeing their faces, never stop carrying the weight of their absence. But maybe, just maybe, she could carry them towards something, toward purpose, toward meaning, toward a mission that did not end with 8 rounds and the question of when it would be enough. Maybe it would never be enough. Maybe that was the point. Maybe warriors did not get to stop, did not get to rest, did not get to lay down their burdens. Maybe the only choice was what you did with the burden, whether you let it crush you or whether you used it to build something, to teach something, to pass something forward to the next generation of people who would have to make impossible shots and live with impossible choices. Bobby Reeves had done it, had come home from Korea and taught his granddaughter, had passed forward knowledge that had kept her alive through 13 deployments, had given her skills that had saved countless lives even as they cost her pieces of her soul. Tommy Reeves had done it, had died trying to save others, had given everything for people he had never met, had believed some things mattered more than survival, had proven it with his last breath. Now it was Victoria's turn. to carry the legacy, to pass it forward, to take everything she knew and give it to people who needed it, to teach Marines how to make impossible shots so they would not have to carry impossible ghosts, to turn her 8 names into a shield for others, to make Jake's last words mean something real and lasting and worth the price he paid. The desert stretched ahead, empty, hot, unforgiving, like every desert she had ever operated in, like every combat zone she had ever survived. But this time she was not driving toward war. She was driving towards something else, something harder in its own way. The challenge of teaching, of opening up, of trusting that what she knew mattered enough to share, that her failures and successes and trauma and skill could become tools for others, could become the difference between another Marine loading 8 rounds every morning and that Marine coming home to a life worth living. Victoria Reeves drove, the morning sun climbing higher, the heat building, the road unreeling beneath her wheels, and somewhere ahead, waiting in the unknown territory of next Tuesday at 0600, was Quantico, was Bull, was a chance to prove that contractors could teach Marines, that women could teach men, that the broken could teach the whole. That legacy was not about bloodline. It was about passing forward what you learned, making sure the next warrior had every advantage, every skill, every piece of hard-won knowledge that might keep them alive when the mathematics failed, and the only thing left was training and will and the absolute refusal to quit. She would go to Quantico. She would demonstrate her methods. She would show them what 8 years and 13 deployments and 3,658 meters of combat shooting had taught her. And if they wanted to learn, she would teach. If they did not, she would drive back to Camp Pendleton and resume her ritual. 8 rounds, 8 names, the rest of her life measured in perfect shots that meant nothing to anyone but ghosts. But maybe they would listen. Maybe they would see past the contractor label and the civilian status, and the fact that she was a woman in a world that still sometimes doubted women could be warriors. Maybe they would see what Bull had seen. Legacy, lineage, 3 generations of people who had bled for something larger than themselves, who had paid prices that could never be fully calculated, who had survived not because they were lucky, but because they were skilled and trained and absolutely unwilling to let others die if their skills could prevent it. The road stretched ahead, the future unknown, the past inescapable. But for the first time in 288 days, Victoria Reeves felt something other than grief and routine and the mechanical precision of ritual. She felt possibility, dangerous, fragile, easily destroyed, but real. Maybe that was enough. Maybe possibility was all anyone ever got. Maybe the rest was just showing up, loading the rifle, making the shot, doing the work, teaching the next generation, passing forward the legacy, making sure Bobby Reeves and Tommy Reeves and Jake Chen and all the others did not die for nothing, making sure their sacrifice purchased something real, something lasting, something worth the price they paid. Victoria drove. The sun climbed, the desert waited, and ahead, somewhere in the unknown territory of next Tuesday, was Quantico. Was a chance, was a mission, was a reason to load 9 rounds instead of 8, was a reason to keep going, and sometimes, for warriors, that was all you needed. A reason, a mission, a purpose. The rest would follow. Or it would not. But at least she would know she tried. At least she would know she showed up. At least she would know that when Bull had offered her a path forward, she had taken it, had walked toward the possibility instead of away from it, had chosen to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth fighting for, still something worth teaching, still something worth sacrificing for. And that belief, fragile as it was enough to drive toward, enough to hope for, enough to make her think that maybe tomorrow morning at 4:30, when she loaded her rifle, she might whisper 9 names instead of 8. And that 9th name might be her own, not as a ghost, but as someone who survived, someone who taught, someone who passed it forward, someone who made the legacy real. The road stretched ahead. Victoria drove, and for now, that was enough. The drive from California to Virginia took 3 days. Victoria could have made it in 2, but she was in no hurry. The RV lumbered across desert highways and mountain passes. through Nevada and Utah and Colorado, through Kansas wheat fields and Missouri forests, through landscapes that changed but never quite erased the feeling that she was driving towards something she could not take back. A commitment, a test, a reckoning with everything she had become. She arrived at Quantico on Monday evening. The Marine Corps base sprawled across nearly 60,000 acres of Virginia pine forest, home to the FBI Academy, the Marine Corps Officer Candidate School, the Scout Sniper School that Bull wanted her to address. She parked her RV in a visitor lot and sat in the driver's seat, watching Marines move between buildings, young men and women in camouflage utilities, purpose in their stride, direction in their movements, everything she no longer had. Her phone buzzed. Text from Bull. Tomorrow 0600, range 5. Bring your best. They will not make this easy. She did not reply, just set the phone down and stared at the rifle case in the back of the RV. The Barrett waited, patient, indifferent to her doubts. Machines did not care about meaning or purpose, or whether their operator was worthy. They simply performed. She envied that simplicity. Sleep came hard that night. When it came at all, she lay in the narrow RV bunk and listened to the sounds of a military base at night. Distant diesel engines, the rhythmic cadence of a drill instructor somewhere conducting evening physical training. The sounds were familiar, comforting in a way that civilian life had never managed to be. She had spent so much of her adult life on bases like this, living in temporary housing, preparing for deployments, existing in the liminal space between peace and war. Maybe that was all she knew how to do, exist in transition, never quite settling, never quite leaving. At 0430, she gave up on sleep, rose and dressed in practical civilian clothes, jeans, boots, a plain t-shirt, no logos, no affiliations, nothing to mark her as anything other than what she was, a contractor, an outsider, someone asking for permission to enter a world that had already decided she did not belong. She loaded the Barrett into her truck. The RV stayed behind. This was not a drive that required living quarters. Just her and the rifle and whatever waited at range 5. She arrived at 0545. Early, always early. Combat had taught her that punctuality was a weapon. Arriving first gave you time to assess, to prepare, to control what little you could control before chaos took over. Range 5 sat at the eastern edge of the training complex, a long-range facility capable of shots out to 2,800 meters. Observation towers flanked both sides, target berms at measured intervals. Everything precise, everything measured, everything designed to test marksmanship under controlled conditions. She wondered if that was the problem. If control was the enemy of combat effectiveness, if teaching Marines to shoot perfectly on sterile ranges left them unprepared for the beautiful chaos of actual war. 4 men waited at the range control building. She recognized Bull immediately. Tall, gray-haired, that SEAL confidence that came from 3 decades of doing impossible things. The other 3 were new. One wore the insignia of a Marine colonel, silver eagles on his collar. Probably early 60s, face like weathered granite, eyes that had seen things he would never discuss. This would be the obstacle, the gatekeeper, the man who believed tradition was sacred and change was betrayal. The second man was younger, maybe 50. Master gunnery sergeant chevrons, instructor badges, service ribbons that spoke of multiple combat deployments. This was the enforcer, the one who would actually conduct the test, the one whose opinion might matter more than the colonel's official authority. The third was a woman, Army captain, Ranger tab on her shoulder, combat infantry badge. She stood slightly apart from the Marines, an observer maybe, or competition, another woman trying to prove she belonged in a world that still questioned her right to be there. Victoria parked and gathered her equipment, the Barrett case, her range bag, the tools of her trade. She walked toward the group with the same calm she brought to every mission. No hurry, no hesitation. Just forward movement, one foot in front of the other until the objective was reached. Bull made introductions, his voice formal now, professional. The easy camaraderie of their first meeting replaced by the careful distance of official business. Contractor Victoria Reeves. This is Colonel James Hackett, Director of the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, Master Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Kowalski, Chief Instructor, and Captain Elena Vasquez, Army Ranger School Instructor. attached to MARSOC for joint training evaluation. Victoria shook hands. Hackett's grip was firm, but not aggressive, testing without being obvious about it. Kowalski's handshake was professional, neutral, the grip of a man reserving judgment. Vasquez surprised her. The Army captain's grip was strong, sustained, eye contact direct, a message being sent, sister to sister, woman to woman. We are being watched. Do not give them ammunition. Colonel Hackett spoke first. His voice carried the gravel of too many years shouting over rifles and explosions. Contractor Reeves, Sergeant Major Cunningham speaks highly of your skills. That is noteworthy. Bull does not praise lightly, but speaking highly and recommending institutional change are different things. Today you will demonstrate your methods. If we are impressed, we discuss next steps. If not, you have our thanks for your time and nothing further. Understood, sir. Victoria kept her voice neutral, emotionless, the tone of a professional discussing business. Hackett gestured toward the range. We have set up a competition, you against Master Gunny Kowalski, head-to-head shoot. 1,000 meters, 10 rounds, 10 cold bore start. Both of you use identical equipment, identical ammunition, identical conditions. The best group wins. Simple. Simple. Victoria almost smiled at that. Nothing was ever simple, but she understood the game. They wanted to see if a contractor could outshoot their best. If civilian training could compete with Marine Corps doctrine, if she was real or just another fraud with bought credentials and borrowed credibility. When do we start? She looked at Kowalski. The master gunny met her eyes. No hostility there, just professional interest. The look of one craftsman evaluating another. Now, Hackett checked his watch. You have 10 minutes to prepare. Then we shoot. The range stretched before them. 1,000 meters of Virginia morning. Temperature climbing. Humidity high. Wind beginning to stir as the sun rose. All the variables changing. Nothing static, nothing perfect. Exactly like combat, except nobody was shooting back. Victoria set up her shooting position, laid out her mat, extended the Barrett's bipod, loaded a 10-round magazine with M33 ball ammunition. Nothing special, standard military issue. The same rounds every Marine sniper trained with. No advantages, no excuses. Kowalski set up 20 feet to her left. His movements were practiced, efficient, decades of muscle memory. He handled his rifle with the casual competence of someone who had done this 10,000 times, who could disassemble and reassemble the weapon blindfolded, who knew every click of elevation and windage by heart. Bull stood behind them with a stopwatch. Hackett and Vasquez moved to the observation tower. Binoculars ready, spotting scopes trained on the 1,000-meter target line, waiting to see which warrior would prove superior, which method would prevail. Traditional Marine Corps training or contractor learned adaptation. Range is hot. Bull's voice carried across the morning air. Shooters may commence when ready. Time starts on first shot, ends on 10th, 10 minutes maximum. Victoria settled behind her rifle, checked her scope, verified her zero. The rifle was properly set for 1,000 meters at sea level under standard atmospheric conditions. But conditions were never standard. Temperature was 68 degrees, higher than the 59-degree standard. Humidity was 76%, higher than the standard 78%, but close enough to cause subtle changes in air density. Wind was 7 miles per hour, 3 o'clock, shifting to 2 o'clock, variable and unpredictable. She pulled out her Kestrel weather meter, started taking readings, building a picture of what the air was actually doing. Not what it should be doing according to tables and charts. What it was doing right now in this moment, on this range, under these specific conditions. Beside her, Kowalski was doing something different. He had pulled out a green hardback notebook. Data on previous engagement. Dope book. The traditional Marine Corps method. Recorded data from previous shoots at this range under similar conditions. Historical accuracy. Proven methods. The accumulated wisdom of thousands of rounds fired and recorded and analyzed. Victoria did not use a dope book. Every shot was different. Every moment unique. Historical data could guide you, but it could not save you when conditions changed faster than you could flip pages. She had learned to read the environment, to trust her senses, to adapt in real time based on what she could see and feel and measure right now. She watched the mirage downrange, heat shimmer rising from the warming ground. The mirage danced left, indicating wind from right to left. But the wind flag showed wind from left to right. Contradiction. The mirage was showing her what the air was doing at ground level. The flag showed what was happening at 6 feet. She would have to account for both. Adjust her hold to split the difference. Trust the mathematics, and then trust her instinct to know when mathematics were not enough. Kowalski fired his first shot. The report echoed across the range. Through her scope, Victoria saw the impact. 2 inches right of center. Excellent shooting, exactly what you would expect from a Marine Corps Master Gunnery Sergeant with 27 years of experience. She fired her first shot, adjusted her hold based on what the mirage had shown her, trusted the wind she could see over the wind the instruments reported. The rifle thundered. Recoil drove into her shoulder. Impact dead center. First round hit. Cold bore accuracy. The hardest shot of any string because the rifle had not yet warmed, because you had no previous impacts to reference, because everything was theoretical until that first bullet proved you right or wrong. Kowalski fired again, adjusted based on his first impact, brought the second round closer to center. 1 inch left now. Excellent correction. Textbook Marine Corps shooting, using observed impacts to refine subsequent shots. The proven method, the reliable method, the method that had produced expert marksmen for 50 years. Victoria fired her second round, did not adjust based on her first shot, adjusted based on what the wind was doing now, what the mirage showed now. The conditions had changed in the 30 seconds between shots. The wind had shifted. Temperature had climbed half a degree. Humidity had dropped 1%. Tiny changes, invisible to most shooters, but at 1,000 meters, tiny changes mattered. Her second shot hit 1 inch left of her first, both in the center circle, both kill shots, both proof that reading conditions mattered as much as mechanical consistency. The shooting continued. Kowalski worked methodically through his 10 rounds, each shot informed by the previous, each adjustment calculated from his dope book and observed impacts. His group size was excellent, 8.3 inches, better than 99% of shooters would ever achieve. Proof that Marine Corps methods worked, that tradition had value, that doing things the proven way produced results. Victoria finished her 10 rounds in 6 minutes, 2 minutes faster than Kowalski, not because she was rushing, because she was not consulting books, not cross-referencing tables, just reading and reacting and trusting 8 years of combat experience. Her group measured 6.1 inches, smaller than Kowalski's. But more importantly, her first shot had hit dead center. In combat, there were no second chances, no opportunity to adjust based on observed impacts. The first shot had to count, had to be right, had to end the threat before the threat ended you. Bull called time, walked down range with Hackett and Vasquez to examine the targets. Victoria stayed at her shooting position, did not approach, did not try to influence the evaluation, just waited. Let the work speak. Let the impacts tell the story. The 3 evaluators spent 5 minutes at the target line, measuring, discussing, pointing. Finally, they walked back. Hackett's expression was unreadable. Vasquez looked impressed but tried to hide it. Bull just nodded, the small acknowledgement of one professional to another. Hackett spoke first. Contractor Reeves, your group was smaller, your first shot was superior, your time was faster. Those are facts, but facts do not tell the whole story. Master Gunny Kowalski used proven Marine Corps methodology, data-driven, consistent, replicable. Your method appears to be intuitive, based on real-time assessment. That works for you, but can it be taught? Can average Marines learn to read conditions the way you do? Or is this a skill that requires 8 years of combat experience to develop? It can be taught, sir. Victoria met his eyes. I have taught it to other contractors, to foreign military personnel, to anyone willing to learn that shooting is not just about the rifle. It is about reading the environment, understanding that every shot is different, adapting instead of relying on historical data that might not match current reality. Kowalski spoke for the first time. His voice was respectful, professional. Ma'am, I watched you shoot. You are good, better than good, but you are also taking risks. What happens when conditions change faster than you can assess? When there is no time to read mirage and verify wind and calculate adjustments? When you need to rely on fundamentals instead of adaptation? Then fundamentals save you. Victoria did not hesitate. I am not saying fundamentals do not matter. I am saying fundamentals are the baseline, the foundation. But real combat requires building on that foundation. Static data from OPE books cannot account for every variable, cannot adapt when the enemy changes position or weather shifts or your equipment fails. Teaching Marines to think, to assess, to adapt. That is what keeps them alive when the textbook solutions fail. Vasquez stepped forward. She had been silent until now, listening, evaluating. Now she spoke with the careful precision of someone choosing words that would matter. Contractor Reeves, I am supposed to see you as competition, woman to woman, Army to Marines, traditional methods to unconventional approaches. But I have been teaching combat marksmanship for 6 years. I have seen our pass rates decline. I have watched good soldiers fail because they could not adapt when conditions did not match their training. What you just demonstrated is not a replacement for fundamentals. It is an enhancement. And if you can teach that enhancement to our students, then I hope these gentlemen are smart enough to listen. Hackett looked at Vasquez, then at Kowalski, then at Bull. Something passed between them. Some unspoken communication. Finally, the colonel turned back to Victoria. We are not convinced. Not yet. Beating our best instructor in a range competition proves you can shoot. It does not prove you can teach. So here is what we are going to do. We have 8 students, Marines who have already failed Scout Sniper School once. Some failed spectacularly. Medical issues, psychological problems, physical limitations. We have deemed them unsuitable for sniper operations. They are waiting for medical discharge or reassignment to non-sniper roles. You have 6 weeks. If you can get even one of them through final qualification, we will reconsider our assessment. If they all fail, you leave and we never speak of this again. What are the terms of final qualification? Victoria kept her voice level, gave away nothing. Standard Scout Sniper graduation requirements. Kowalski's voice was matter of fact. Cold bore accuracy at 600, 800, 1,000, and 1,200 meters. Unknown distance engagement. Stress shoot after physical exhaustion. Fieldcraft and stalking. They pass everything or they fail. No handicaps, no accommodations. The same test every Marine since 1970 has faced. And if they pass, when do I get final say on training methods? If they pass, Hackett's eyes were hard, then we will incorporate your methods into our curriculum. You will have a permanent position as civilian instructor. You will help redesign our advanced training. But Contractor Reeves, they will not pass. We have already spent 6 months trying to salvage these Marines. Our best instructors could not help them. I do not believe 6 weeks with a contractor will succeed where we failed. But Sergeant Major Cunningham believes in you. So I am giving you this chance. Use it or waste it. The choice is yours. I will need to meet them first, Victoria said. The 8 Marines, if they do not want to learn from me, this is pointless. They are waiting out of the barracks. Bull checked his watch. I can take you there now. But Victoria, fair warning, these are not eager students. These are broken warriors. Men and women the system has already given up on. Some of them have given up on themselves. You will have to earn their trust before you can teach them anything. Then let us not waste time. The walk to the barracks took 10 minutes. Bull led the way. Victoria followed. Neither spoke. What was there to say? The mission was clear. The stakes were obvious. 8 broken Marines, 6 weeks. Proved that adaptation could succeed where tradition had failed. Proved that a contractor could teach what the Marine Corps could not. Proved that she deserved to be here. That her grandfather's legacy meant something. That Uncle Tommy had not died in vain. That 8 years and 13 deployments had taught her something worth passing forward. The barracks building was older, Korean War-era construction, concrete block walls and narrow windows, institutional and sterile and utterly lacking in warmth. Bull opened the door and gestured Victoria inside, down a hallway, past empty classrooms and storage rooms, to a common area where 8 people waited. They looked up as she entered. 8 faces, 8 stories, 8 warriors who had tried and failed and were waiting to fail again. She could see it in their posture, the defeat, the resignation, the knowledge that this was just another formality before the system disposed of them. Bull made introductions, his voice formal, professional. treating this like a military formation even though everyone here knew the truth. This was not a formation. This was a collection of leftovers. People the Marine Corps no longer wanted. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Webb, 40 years old, 3 tours Afghanistan. Traumatic brain injury from IED blast. Developed hand tremor. Failed Scout Sniper School Week 4 when the tremor caused consecutive misses. Facing medical discharge. Webb stood, older than the others, gray starting at his temples, eyes that had seen too much. He extended his hand and Victoria shook it. His grip was firm, but she could feel the tremor. Subtle, constant, the neurological damage that no amount of willpower could overcome. Ma'am, Webb's voice was steady despite the tremor. I can still do the math, still read when, still make the tactical call. But my hands betray me. If you cannot fix that, I am done. I do not fix things, Gunnery Sergeant. Victoria met his eyes. I teach people to work with what they have instead of mourning what they lost. Webb sat back down. Something flickered across his face, not hope exactly, but maybe the absence of despair. That was a start. Staff Sergeant Anthony Bonelli, Bull continued. 38, Army Ranger cross-training with Marines, lost left eye to shrapnel in Mosul, training with prosthetic eye, depth perception issues, failed week 3. Could not judge distance accurately. Bonelli stood. The prosthetic eye was good, almost undetectable. But Victoria knew what to look for. The way he turned his head slightly to compensate for missing peripheral vision. The careful way he navigated around furniture. The man had adapted to losing an eye in daily life. Now he needed to adapt to sniping with one eye. That was possible. Difficult, but possible. Staff Sergeant. She nodded to him. You can still shoot. You just need to trust your tools more than your eye. Rangefinders, mil-dot, reticle calculations, reference objects. There are ways. I have tried them all, ma'am. Bonelli's voice was frustrated, bitter. I still misjudge distance. I still miss, and misses get people killed. Then we teach you to verify instead of guess. Cross-check your estimates with multiple methods. Use the eye you have better than most people use too. Bonelli sat, skeptical but listening. Petty Officer First Class David Chen. Bull's voice carried something new now. Careful, almost gentle. 29. SEAL Team 7, brother of Jake Chen. Victoria felt the world tilt. Jake Chen, the name she whispered every morning. The first round, the first ghost. And now his younger brother stood in front of her. Younger, but with the same eyes, the same stubborn set to his jaw, the same Chen family genetics that had produced one of the finest warriors she had ever known. David Chen stood, looked at her, really looked, evaluating, judging, trying to decide something. Contractor Reeves. His voice was controlled. Too controlled. Jake wrote letters. He told me about you, about Syria, about the rooftop, about the 12 seconds you hesitated before you followed his order. Victoria could not breathe, could not speak. She had not known Jake had told his family, had not known there were letters, had not prepared for this moment. Chen continued, the Navy psychiatrist says I have survivor guilt, says I idealize my dead brother, says I am emotionally unsuitable for sniper operations because I freeze under pressure. Risk of decision paralysis. That is why I failed. Not because I cannot shoot, because when it matters, I think too much. I become Jake. I try to make his choices, and I freeze. The room was silent, every eye on them, waiting to see what Victoria would say, how she would handle this. The ghost made flesh. The consequence of her actions, standing 3 feet away, asking for something she did not know if she could give. David, she forced herself to meet his eyes. Your brother gave me an order. I hesitated because I was trying to find another way. 12 seconds of trying to save him. 12 seconds too long. He died because I hesitated. I have carried that for 2 years. If you want me to leave, I will understand. Chen shook his head. You do not understand. I am not here for revenge. I am here because Jake trusted you. Because in those 12 seconds you tried to save him. Most contractors would not have hesitated at all, would have taken the shot immediately, followed doctrine. But you tried. Jake knew that. That is why he gave the order. He knew you would not waste his death, would not let it be meaningless. I am here because I want to understand what he saw in you, why he believed you were worth dying for. Victoria had no answer, no words adequate to that moment. She just nodded, accepted the weight Chen was placing on her, added it to the burden she already carried. The introductions continued. Sergeant First Class Luis Herrera, Green Beret, 35. Sole survivor of 8-man team ambush in Yemen. Panic attacks triggered by loud noises. Failed week 2 when range fire caused flashback. Abandoned rifle mid-drill. Corporal Jennifer Jackson, 26. Marine Infantry, only woman in the group. Failed week 5. Official reason was lack of upper body strength for equipment humping. Unofficial reason was harassment from male students who did not want women in the Scout sniper community. Chief Warrant Officer Robert Sullivan, 45, National Guard, oldest student, excellent fundamentals but crippling self-doubt. Failed week 6, could not pass stress shoots under time pressure. Staff Sergeant Tyrell Washington, 31, Air Force Pararescue, excellent medic, average shooter, failed week 4, could not meet marksmanship minimums beyond 600 meters. Sergeant Michael Rourke, 27, Marine, failed week 3. Official reason was lack of mental discipline and focus. He was quiet, watchful. Something about him made Victoria's instincts fire warning signals, but she could not pinpoint why. 8 warriors, 8 failures, 8 people the system had declared unsuitable, 8 chances to prove that adaptation mattered, that flexibility was strength, that broken did not mean useless. Victoria looked at them, all of them, saw the doubt, the resignation, the expectation of failure. They had been told they were not good enough, not by one instructor, but by an institution, by the entire weight of Marine Corps tradition and doctrine. That kind of rejection carved deep, left scars that training could not easily heal. She spoke carefully, choosing words that would matter. I am not a Marine, I never will be. I am a contractor, a civilian, someone this institution does not fully trust. Colonel Hackett expects you to fail. Your regular instructors already wrote you off. The system wants you gone. So here is what I am offering. Not a guarantee, not a promise, just a chance. 6 weeks, starting tomorrow at 04:30. Same time I shoot every morning. We train together, we adapt together, we figure out how to work with what you have instead of mourning what you lost. I do not care why you failed before. I care why you are still here. If you are here because you have to be, leave now. If you are here because you want this more than anything, show up tomorrow. Prove that failure is not final. Prove that adaptation is strength. Prove that the system is wrong. She paused, let the words settle, then finished. Tomorrow morning, range 5, 04:30. You want to learn what 8 years and 13 deployments taught me? Be there. She turned and walked out. Did not wait for responses. Did not ask for commitments. Just laid out the terms and left them to decide. Bull followed her outside. They walked in silence back toward the parking area. Finally, Bull spoke. That was either brilliant or a disaster. I cannot tell which yet. Neither can I. Victoria pulled out her truck keys. But at 04:30 tomorrow we will know. Either they show up or they do not. Either they want this or they are just going through motions. I cannot teach people who do not want to learn. Chen is going to be difficult. Bull's voice was careful. Jake's ghost will haunt that whole process. I know, Victoria opened her truck door. But maybe that is why he is here. Maybe he needs to face that ghost. Work through it. Find out who he is instead of trying to be his brother. What about the others? Webb's tremor is neurological. No amount of training will make it disappear. Bonelli is functionally one-eyed. Herrera has PTSD that could get someone killed. Jackson faced harassment that would have broken most people. Sullivan is 45 and convinced he is too old. Washington is a great medic, but cannot shoot. And Rourke. There is something off about that one. I know, Victoria climbed into the truck. All of that is true, but they are also warriors who refuse to quit, who showed up even after being told they were not good enough, who still want this despite every reason to walk away. That counts for something. Maybe it counts for everything. Bull nodded. Tomorrow at 04:30 then, I will be watching, curious to see if any of them show. They will show. Victoria started the engine, all 8. They might not believe they can succeed, but they will show, because showing up is what warriors do, even when hope is gone, even when failure seems certain. They show up anyway. And that is where we start. She drove back to her RV, parked, sat in the driver's seat as evening settled over Quantico. Tomorrow would tell the story. Tomorrow she would find out if 8 broken Marines could become whole again, if her methods had value, if Jake Chen's death could purchase something lasting, if 3 generations of warriors could pass forward something worth preserving. Tomorrow at 0430, Range 5, 8 warriors and 1 contractor, all of them carrying ghosts, all of them trying to figure out how to live after war, all of them looking for proof that adaptation was possible. That change was strength. That failure was not final. Victoria loaded her rifle magazine. 8 rounds, 8 names, the ritual that had sustained her for 288 days. Tomorrow she would load a 9th round. For David Chen, for Jake's brother, for the young SEAL trying to escape his brother's shadow, for the warrior who needed to learn that honoring the dead meant living well, not dying the same death. She whispered the names as each round slid home. Jake, Michael, David Rodriguez, Hassan, Rebecca, Yuri, Sarah, Marcus, and tomorrow, one more. David Chen, not as a ghost, as a student, as someone she could teach, someone she could help, someone who might prove that legacy was not about replicating the past but building on it. The night settled over Quantico. Marines moved between buildings. Diesel engines rumbled. Drill instructors shouted cadence. The base lived and breathed and continued regardless of her presence. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. Tomorrow, 8 warriors would make a choice. To show up or give up. To try or quit. To believe that maybe, just maybe, a contractor could teach them something the Marine Corps could not. Victoria sat in the darkness, the rifle loaded, the names whispered, the weight familiar and constant and strangely comforting. Tomorrow she would find out if she could carry more than just her own ghosts, if she could help others carry theirs, if teaching was possible, or if she was just another person destined to fail people who trusted her. Tomorrow, 0430, Range 5, the beginning of something, or the end. Only time would tell, only the warriors would decide, only the work would matter. And for tonight, in the darkness of a Virginia parking lot, that was enough. The waiting, the preparation, the knowledge that tomorrow she would try, would show up, would do her best. And sometimes, for warriors, that was all you could offer. Your best, your experience, your willingness to stand beside others and help them find strength they did not know they had. Tomorrow, the word echoed in her mind. Tomorrow, the promise and the threat, the hope and the fear, the possibility that 8 broken warriors could become whole again. That adaptation was real. That legacy mattered. That 3 generations of sacrifice might finally purchase something lasting. Tomorrow, 0430 came like a test, like a judgment. Victoria arrived at Range 5 in darkness and found 7 vehicles already parked. Not 8, 7. She counted again to be certain. 7 trucks and sedans arranged in a neat line. 7 warriors who had decided to show up. 7 people willing to try, despite every reason to quit. 1 missing. She walked toward the firing line carrying her rifle case and found them waiting. Webb stood at the center, natural leader even in a group of failures, even among the broken. Bonelli checked equipment with his one good eye. Chen stared at the eastern horizon where dawn would eventually break. Herrera kept his distance from the others. Jackson adjusted her rifle sling. Sullivan looked nervous. Washington organized ammunition with the careful precision of a medic preparing for surgery. Rourke was absent. Victoria said nothing about the missing Marine, just set down her rifle case and began an unpacking. The Barrett emerged from its foam cradle. Familiar weight, familiar lines, the tool that had defined her adult life. She assembled it in darkness, muscle memory making sight unnecessary. Every piece fitted together with the precision of long practice. Good morning, her voice carried across the pre-dawn quiet. 7 of you showed up. That tells me something. Tells me you are serious. Tells me you still have fight left. So we start. Right now, this moment. No speeches, no motivation, just work. Each of you will make 1 shot, any range you choose. I do not care if you hit. I care how you approach it. She had set up 8 targets before they arrived. 800 meters, 1,000, 1,200, 1,400, 1,600, 1,800, 2,000, 2,200. each target illuminated by chem lights so they could see in the darkness. Each distance a challenge, each shot an opportunity to reveal character. Webb went first. He chose 1,000 meters, set up his rifle with practiced efficiency. But Victoria could see the tremor in his hands. Worse, in the cold morning air. Neurological damage did not care about determination or willpower. The brain sent signals the hands could not quite obey, a constant shake that made precision nearly impossible. Webb settled behind his rifle, tried to steady himself through pure force of will, tried to muscle through the tremor, fight it into submission. Victoria watched and said nothing. Let him try. Let him fail. Some lessons required failure before understanding could take root. The shot broke. Impact 4 inches right of center. A miss by sniper standards. Webb pulled back from his rifle, frustration written across his face. See, his voice was bitter. I cannot control it. 20 years in the Corps, 3 combat deployments, and now my own body betrays me. Victoria knelt beside him, placed her hand on his shoulder. You are trying to control it. That is the problem. Your body has a rhythm now, a pattern. The tremor is not random. It cycles, peaks and troughs. You need to stop fighting the tremor and start working with it. Watch. She took his position behind the rifle. Let her hands shake slightly. Not from neurological damage, but from deliberate muscle tension. Created an artificial tremor. Then she controlled her breathing. Exhaled. Waited. Found the moment between heartbeats where even shaking hands stilled. The respiratory pause. The instant where biology aligned with necessity. You cannot eliminate the tremor, but you can time your shot for when it is minimum. Feel your cycle. Learn your pattern. Shoot when your hands are still, even if that stillness only lasts half a second. Webb looked at her, then at his hands, then back at the rifle. Something shifted in his expression. Not hope exactly, but the absence of despair. The recognition that maybe failure was not inevitable. Maybe adaptation was possible. Benelli chose 1,200 meters. Ambitious for a man with one eye, he set up carefully, used his laser rangefinder, confirmed the distance 3 times. But when he settled behind the scope, Victoria could see the hesitation, the uncertainty, the fundamental doubt that came from not trusting your own perception. His shot impacted 8 inches left, a significant miss. Benelli sat back. I misjudged. Even with the rangefinder, even with verification, I still misjudged. Victoria shook her head. You did not trust your tools. You second-guessed, used the rangefinder but then let doubt creep in. Adjusted based on feeling instead of data. You have one eye, so stop trying to shoot like you have 2. Use your tools. Trust them completely. Verify with multiple methods if you need to. Mil-dot reticle, reference objects, terrain association. But once you have data, commit to it. Do not let missing depth perception make you doubt what instruments tell you. Benelli absorbed this, nodded slowly, the kind of nod that said he understood intellectually but would need practice to believe emotionally. Chen chose 1,600 meters, the longest shot anyone had attempted. Victoria knew why. Jake had been a 1,600-meter shooter. Jake had made impossible shots at distances that defied belief. David Chen was trying to be his brother, trying to prove he was worthy of the legacy. He set up perfectly. Textbook fundamentals, everything exactly as the manual specified. But when his finger touched the trigger, he froze. 15 seconds of complete stillness. No breathing, no movement, just paralysis. Finally, he fired. The shot went wide, missed by a foot, pulled from tension and overthinking and trying to be someone he was not. Chen stood, walked away from the rifle. Victoria followed. You are not Jake, she said it quietly, only for him to hear. You will never be Jake, and that is not failure. That is reality. Your brother was an exceptional warrior, but he was also human, flawed, mortal. He died because he made a choice, a good choice, a brave choice, but a choice that cost him everything. You do not honor him by dying the same death. You honor him by living better, by being David Chen instead of Jake's ghost. Chen turned to face her. His eyes were wet, but no tears fell. The grief of a man who had been holding back for too long. How do I stop seeing him every time I aim? How do I stop trying to make his shots? Be his warrior. You do not stop, Victoria said. You make space for both. You carry Jake with you. Remember his lessons. Honor his sacrifice. But you shoot your own shots, make your own choices, become your own kind of warrior. That is what he would have wanted, not a copy, but a brother who learned from his example and then exceeded it in your own way. Chen nodded, said nothing more, but something had shifted. Some weight had been acknowledged if not yet released. The morning progressed. Herrera chose 800 meters, the shortest range, the safest choice. But halfway through his setup, Washington chambered a round in his own rifle. The metallic sound echoed across the range. Sharp, sudden, unexpected. Herrera flinched, stood, backed away from his rifle. His breathing accelerated, eyes unfocused, transported somewhere else. Yemen, the ambush. The moment when his entire team died and he lived. Victoria moved slowly, no sudden gestures, no loud voices, just calm approach. Luis, she kept her voice soft. You are at Quantico. Virginia, the United States. Your team is not here. You are safe. Right now in this moment, you are safe. Herrera's breathing began to slow. His eyes refocused, found her face, recognized where he was, who he was with, the present reality instead of the past trauma. I know. His voice shook. I know where I am, but my body does not. My body still thinks I am there, still reacts like bullets are incoming. Then we teach your body, Victoria said. Exposure in controlled doses. You shoot when you decide, not when noise decides for you. We will work with sound, gradually, until your nervous system learns that range fire is not combat, that loud noises here mean training, not death. Jackson chose 1,400 meters. She struggled with the rifle weight, even with proper positioning, even with bone support instead of muscle. Her smaller frame made the Barrett M82A1 awkward, difficult. The rifle was designed for larger shooters, built with male body proportions in mind. But she made the shot, 3 inches high, still center mass, still a kill. You compensated, Victoria noted. You figured out how to make it work despite the disadvantage. That is adaptation. That is what separates good from great. Not fighting with what you have, working with it. Sullivan chose 1,000 meters, but he hesitated before shooting, kept looking at the others, aware of being watched, aware of being judged. The pressure paralyzed him. Chief, Victoria's voice cut through his spiral. In combat, your team is always watching. Stakes are always life and death. If you cannot shoot with people observing here, you will freeze when it matters most. Stop treating this like a test. Treat it like a mission. You are not performing for us. You are accomplishing an objective. The objective is hitting that target. Everything else is noise. Sullivan took a breath, refocused, made the shot, 4 inches left of center. Not perfect, but good enough. Washington chose 600 meters. Within his comfort zone, he shot well. 2-inch group. Proof that he could shoot, just not far, just not with the confidence required for sniper operations. You think like a medic, Victoria observed. Precise, methodical, calculating dosages and effects. Ballistics is the same, small numbers, huge consequences. You already know how to do this, you just do not believe you can apply it to shooting. Washington looked at her. Understanding dawning, the recognition that skills transferred, that expertise in one domain could inform another. The sun began to rise, golden light spreading across range 5, illuminating 7 warriors and 1 instructor, 8 people trying to figure out how to adapt, how to overcome, how to become something other than what the system had declared them to be. Victoria gathered them together. Tomorrow, same time, we do this again and the day after, and every day until final qualification. You want to pass, you want to prove the system wrong, then show up, work, adapt. Stop mourning what you lost and start maximizing what you have. That is the only way forward. They dispersed, drove back to barracks, left Victoria alone on the range with her rifle and her thoughts. 1 day down, 41 to go, 7 warriors committed, 1 still missing. She wondered about Rourke, wondered why he had not shown, wondered if he was truly a failure or something else entirely. The training continued, day after day, week after week. Victoria taught them to read wind through mirage, to calculate bullet drop accounting for altitude and temperature, to time shots between heartbeats, to adapt equipment when it failed, to shoot accurately after sprinting, after exhaustion, after stress positions that made every muscle scream. Webb learned his tremor pattern, started timing shots for the brief moments when his hands stilled. His groups tightened. 1,000-meter shots that had missed by inches now hit within the center circle. Not perfect, but combat effective. Benelli embraced his tools, stopped trying to judge distance by feel and started trusting instruments. Laser rangefinder, mil-dot calculations, reference object methods. He became faster at range estimation than shooters with two eyes, compensated for his disability by developing expertise that exceeded the able-bodied. Chen slowly stopped freezing. The paralysis that had defined his previous failure began to recede, not eliminated, but managed, controlled. He learned to breathe through the moments when Jake's ghost appeared, to acknowledge the fear and then shoot anyway, to make his own choices instead of trying to replicate his brother's legend. Herrera underwent exposure therapy, controlled noise introduction, starting with single shots, then multiple shooters on the line, then simulated explosions at distance, flashbangs that echoed like mortars. His startle response decreased, not gone, but lessened, manageable. Jackson learned team carry techniques, how to partner with others to move equipment that one person could not manage alone. She paired with Sullivan, youngest and oldest, different strengths covering different weaknesses. Together, they were more effective than either could be individually. Washington started treating ballistics like medicine, calculating windage and elevation with the same precision he calculated drug dosages. His 1,200-meter shooting improved, 70% hit rate from 20%. Still not expert, but progressing. Sullivan gained confidence, stopped doubting himself based on age, started trusting experience. 45 years of life had taught him things younger warriors had not yet learned: patience, perspective, the ability to stay calm when others panicked. Those were assets, advantages, not liabilities. And Rourke finally appeared. Week 3, he showed up at 0430 looking sheepish, apologetic. "Ma'am, I apologize for missing the first weeks. I had orders, family emergency. I am committed now." Victoria studied him. Something felt wrong, off. His apology was too smooth, too practiced. But she had no evidence, no reason to refuse him, just instinct. And instinct was not proof. "You missed 3 weeks of foundational training. You will have to catch up on your own time, extra hours, extra work. Can you commit to that?" "Yes, ma'am, absolutely." "Then get on the line." Rourke integrated into the group, and Victoria noticed immediately that he did not need to catch up. He shot as well as the others despite missing 3 weeks. Better than some. His fundamentals were too good, too polished. He had not failed for lack of skill. He had failed for some other reason. A reason he was not sharing. She pulled him aside after the 4th morning. "Mike, you did not fail Scout Sniper School because you lack discipline. You shoot too well. Your fundamentals are too solid. So why did you really fail? What are you not telling me?" Rourke's expression flickered. Guilt, fear, something else Victoria could not quite identify. "Ma'am, I cannot say, please do not ask. If you are here to sabotage this program, I need to know now." "I am not sabotaging, I swear. I just have orders. But I am learning, really learning. What you teach matters. Please let me stay." Victoria wanted to press, wanted to demand answers, but something in his voice stopped her. Desperation, real fear, not of her, of someone else, something else. She let it go, for now, but her guard stayed up. Her instincts remained alert. Week 4 brought the crisis. Victoria designed a stress shoot, 1,500-meter targets, 60-second time limit, physical exhaustion first, 100-meter sprint followed by 50 burpees, then immediate engagement. The exercise was meant to simulate arriving at a sniper hide after enemy contact, when your heart rate was elevated, when your muscles were fatigued, when there was no time to recover and stabilize. 7 students rotated through. Each one struggled, but completed the evolution. Then came Herrera's turn. He ran the course, completed the burpees, approached his rifle. Washington was staging equipment nearby, preparing for his own run. Unthinking, he racked his rifle bolt. The metallic sound echoed across the range. Herrera's PTSD triggered. Full flashback. He was no longer at Quantico. He was in Yemen. The valley, the ambush, incoming fire. His teammates dying. He screamed, dropped to the ground, covered his head. In his panic, he knocked over a rifle stand. A loaded rifle fell. The impact caused an accidental discharge. The round fired downrange. Safe direction. No one hurt. But unauthorized fire, negligent discharge. In any sniper program, that meant automatic dismissal. The range safety officer shut down the range immediately, called for Master Gunnery Sergeant Kowalski. Within 30 minutes, the range was swarming with instructors and safety personnel. Herrera sat on the ground, head in his hands, shaking, knowing he had just ended his own career. Kowalski arrived, face like granite, voice cold and professional. Negligent discharge. Sergeant First Class Herrera, you are dismissed from this program effective immediately. You will report to medical for psychiatric evaluation and processing for separation. It was not negligence. Victoria stepped forward. It was a medical episode. PTSD, triggered by unexpected noise. This is exactly why he is here, to work through combat trauma under controlled conditions. The result is the same. Kowalski's voice was unyielding. An unsafe range, a discharged weapon. Those are facts. Your methods created a dangerous situation. You are lucky no one was killed. My methods are addressing trauma your system ignored. Victoria felt anger rising, cold and controlled but real. You failed him 6 months ago when you dismissed him for PTSD instead of treating it. Now you want to fail him again for having the same trauma you never helped him overcome. This is not a debate, Kowalski turned to Herrera. Pack your gear. You are done here. Bull Cunningham arrived, summoned by radio. His face was grave. He looked at Herrera, at Victoria, at Kowalski, at the evidence of what had happened. What the hell happened here? Kowalski explained. Clinical, factual, negligent discharge, unsafe training practices, contractor incompetence creating danger. His report was damning, professional, exactly the kind of documentation that would end the program and vindicate Hackett's skepticism. Bull looked at Victoria. She met his eyes, saw the question there. Was this her fault? Had she pushed too hard? Created danger in pursuit of results? Before she could answer, the 7 remaining students stepped forward. Webb spoke, the natural leader finding his voice. Sergeant Major, this was not Contractor Reeves' fault. This was ours. We are broken warriors trying to become whole. That process is messy, dangerous sometimes, but it is also necessary. Herrera has PTSD. That is a fact. Contractor Reeves is the first person who tried to actually treat it instead of just labeling him unfit. If he is dismissed for this, then we all should be dismissed because we are all damaged, all carrying trauma, all trying to overcome wounds the system would rather hide than heal. The other 6 nodded, unified, a team forming, brotherhood in the crucible of shared struggle. Kowalski was unmoved. Your loyalty is noted, but it does not change facts. Safety protocols exist for reasons. Those protocols were violated. By that standard, half the snipers in Korea should have been dismissed. Victoria's voice cut through. The Korean War generation called it combat fatigue and pushed through. You did not have the language for PTSD, did not have the diagnostic criteria, but you had the same symptoms, the same struggles. Why are modern warriors held to a higher standard than your generation? Kowalski started to respond, but Bull held up a hand. This requires a formal hearing. Colonel Hackett will convene a board. Contractor Reeves, Sergeant Herrera, you will be notified of the time. Until then, all training is suspended. Everyone off this range. They dispersed, the 8 students together. Victoria alone, the program suspended, possibly ended. 3 weeks of work potentially erased by one moment. One accident, one system that valued procedure over people. Victoria walked to her truck, sat in the driver's seat, felt the weight of failure settling over her. She had tried, had pushed, had believed that adaptation could overcome institutional inertia. And now Herrera would pay the price for her belief, would lose his career, his benefits, his identity as a warrior, all because she had created conditions that triggered his trauma. Her phone buzzed. Text from Bull, hearing tomorrow at 0900, Hackett's office. Bring everything you have. This will not be easy. She sat in the parking lot as the sun climbed higher, watching Marines move between buildings, young warriors who had not yet been broken, who had not yet learned that the system could be as dangerous as the enemy, that institutions cared more about liability than healing, that paperwork mattered more than people. Another vehicle pulled up beside hers. Webb got out, walked to her window. She rolled it down. Ma'am, the 8 of us are meeting tonight. Planning our response. We want to testify, want to make clear this was not your fault, was not even really Herrera's fault, was the system's fault for never addressing his PTSD properly in the first place. You do not have to do that. Victoria kept her voice level. This could affect your careers, your benefits. Standing up to the institution has consequences. We know, Webb's voice was firm, but some things matter more than careers. You taught us that adaptation over doctrine, people over procedure. We will not let you face this alone. We will not let Herrera be sacrificed to protect the institution's reputation. He walked back to his vehicle, drove away, left Victoria sitting in her truck trying to process what had just happened. 8 warriors she had known for 3 weeks were willing to risk everything to defend her, to defend each other. That was not training. That was brotherhood. The invisible bond that formed between people who faced adversity together, who struggled and failed and got back up together. The afternoon brought another surprise. Sergeant Michael Rourke appeared at her RV, knocked on the door. She opened it, studied him, still suspicious, still uncertain what his real purpose was. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you. It is important." "Come in." He entered, sat at the small table, looked uncomfortable, conflicted. "I was sent here to document unsafe practices. Colonel Hackett hired me to be an observer, to find evidence that contractor training is dangerous. I have been reporting to him daily." The words hit like bullets. Betrayal, sabotage, everything her instincts had been warning her about. Rourke had been a plant, a spy, gathering evidence to destroy the program. "How long?" Her voice was cold. "Since the beginning. I failed scout sniper school on purpose. Followed Hackett's orders. He told me to document everything. Find proof that your methods endanger Marines. Use today's incident as the final evidence needed to shut this down permanently." Victoria felt rage building, controlled, focused, the anger of someone who had trusted and been betrayed. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because it is wrong." Rourke met her eyes. "I have watched you for 3 weeks, watched you take 8 Marines everyone else gave up on and turn them into a team. Watched you address trauma the system ignored. Watched you teach adaptation that could save lives. Hackett's methods are not working. Pass rates prove it. Combat effectiveness reports prove it. But he cannot admit that 50 years of doctrine might need updating. So he sent me to sabotage you, to ensure you failed, to protect his legacy at the expense of future Marines. What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I want to confess. Tomorrow at the hearing, I will tell them everything. That Hackett planted me, that he wanted you to fail, that the real danger is not your training methods, but an institution that refuses to adapt. I will lose my career, face disciplinary action, but it is the right thing to do. What you are teaching matters. These Marines deserve better than a system that protects reputation over effectiveness." Victoria studied him, trying to assess sincerity, trying to determine if this was another layer of deception. But she saw only guilt in his eyes. Genuine remorse. The look of a man who had compromised his integrity and was trying to reclaim it. "Tomorrow then," she said, "tell the truth, accept the consequences. Maybe that is what courage looks like. Not perfect adherence to doctrine, but the willingness to do what is right even when it costs everything." Rourke left. Victoria sat in her RV as evening settled over Quantico. Tomorrow would bring reckoning, a formal hearing, testimony, evidence. The institution defending itself against the accusations of failure, against the suggestion that change was necessary, against the idea that a civilian contractor might understand something the Marine Corps had missed. She thought about the 8 warriors, about Webb's tremor and Bonelli's missing eye, and Chen's paralysis, and Herrera's PTSD, about Jackson's harassment and Sullivan's age and Washington's doubts, about Rourke's guilt. 8 broken people trying to become whole. 8 warriors the system had declared unsuitable. 8 chances to prove that failure was not final, that adaptation was strength, that institutions could learn. Tomorrow she would face Hackett, would defend her methods, would fight for Herrera and the others, would make the case that tradition without adaptation was just another word for stagnation, that honoring the past meant building on it, not replicating it, that 3 generations of warriors had not sacrificed everything so that their descendants could refuse to learn, refuse to grow, refuse to become better than what came before. She loaded her rifle, 8 rounds, 8 names, the ritual that sustained her. Jake, Michael, David Rodriguez, Hassan, Rebecca, Yuri, Sarah, Marcus. And tomorrow she would add another. Not a ghost, but a living warrior. Luis Herrera, a Green Beret who survived an ambush and deserved better than being discarded by a system too rigid to heal the wounds it created. The night deepened, stars emerged, the base quieted, and somewhere in the darkness, 8 warriors were preparing, planning, getting ready to stand together, to defend each other, to prove that broken did not mean useless, that trauma was not disqualifying, that the bonds forged in shared struggle mattered more than any institutional doctrine. Tomorrow, the word echoed. Tomorrow, the battle would begin, not with rifles, but with words, with testimony, with truth. The hardest kind of combat, the kind where bullets could not solve problems, where marksmanship meant nothing, where only courage and conviction mattered. Victoria sat in the darkness, the rifle loaded, the names whispered, the weight familiar. Tomorrow she would find out if 3 weeks of training had created something lasting. If 8 broken warriors could stand against an institution. If adaptation could overcome tradition. If a contractor could teach Marines what the Marine Corps could not teach itself. Tomorrow, and for tonight that was enough. The waiting, the preparation, the knowledge that she had tried, had taught, had given 8 warriors tools they did not have before, had created a team from broken individuals, had proven that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. A better way. A way that honored the past by building something greater. Tomorrow, the hearing convened at 0900 in Colonel Hackett's office. The room was too small for what it contained, too cramped for the weight of consequence. Hackett sat behind his desk, flanked by Kowalski and 2 other senior instructors. Bull Cunningham stood near the door. Observer, witness, whatever outcome emerged, he would document it. Victoria sat across from Hackett with Herrera beside her. The Green Beret wore his dress uniform, ribbons and badges covering his chest. Combat Infantry Badge, Expert Infantryman Badge, Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters. The physical evidence of a warrior who had given everything for his country, a man who had bled and survived and continued serving, now facing dismissal because his wounds were invisible, because trauma did not photograph as well as shrapnel scars. The 7 other students sat along the wall. Webb, Bonelli, Chen, Jackson, Sullivan, Washington, Rourke, united, silent, waiting to see if the institution would choose healing or procedure, adaptation or tradition, people or paperwork. Hackett opened a folder, read from prepared notes. His voice was formal, clinical. The tone of a man documenting facts without acknowledging the humanity behind them. This hearing concerns the incident at Range 5 on the morning of 14 November. Sergeant First Class Luis Herrera experienced a negligent discharge during training conducted by civilian contractor Victoria Reeves. The discharge created an unsafe training environment, endangered personnel, violated multiple safety protocols. This hearing will determine whether Sergeant Herrera should be separated from service and whether contractor Reeves should be barred from all Marine Corps facilities. The words hung in the air: separation, barred. The institutional language for throwing away people who had become inconvenient. Victoria felt rage building but kept her face neutral, showed nothing. Decades of combat had taught her to control what others could see, to become stone when necessary. Sergeant Herrera, Hackett continued, do you dispute the facts as presented? Did you or did you not discharge a weapon without authorization? Herrera's jaw tightened. His hands gripped his knees, but his voice remained steady. Sir, I experienced a medical episode triggered by PTSD. During that episode, I knocked over a rifle stand. The rifle fell and discharged. That is factually accurate, but it was not negligence. It was a symptom of combat-related trauma that this institution has failed to address. Failed to address. Hackett's voice went cold. We provided you psychiatric evaluation, offered medical treatment, made resources available. You chose to pursue sniper training instead of focusing on recovery. That choice has consequences. With respect, sir, Herrera leaned forward. You offered me discharge, medical separation, loss of career and benefits. You labeled me unfit for service because I carry wounds from serving. Contractor Reeves is the first person who tried to actually treat the trauma instead of just documenting it as disqualifying. She created conditions to help me work through combat stress. That work is difficult, sometimes dangerous, but it is necessary. We cannot risk Marine lives on experimental treatment. Hackett's response was immediate, too quick, like he had prepared this argument before the hearing even began. Standard protocols exist for reasons. Contractor Reeves violated those protocols, created unsafe conditions. The result speaks for itself. Victoria spoke for the first time. Her voice cut through the room, sharp, controlled, precise. Colonel Hackett, your standard protocols have a 34% pass rate. That means 66% of Marines who attempt Scout Sniper School fail. Combat effectiveness reports show those who do pass struggle to adapt to near-peer threats. Your methods are producing failures, not warriors. Maybe the protocols are what need examination, not the people trying to overcome them. Hackett's face hardened. You presume to lecture me on training Marines? I have run this school for 8 years. Before that, I spent 30 years as a sniper. Korean War, Desert Storm, Iraq. I know what works. What you are suggesting is that tradition should be abandoned because pass rates declined. But perhaps pass rates declined because modern recruits are softer, less disciplined, unable to meet standards that previous generations achieved. Or perhaps, Victoria did not blink. War changed and training did not. You are preparing Marines for counterinsurgency when the next conflict will be against advanced militaries with sophisticated counter-sniper capabilities. Your training produces excellent range shooters who struggle in actual combat because ranges do not replicate chaos, do not require adaptation, do not punish rigid adherence to doctrine that no longer matches reality. The room fell silent. Victoria had said what everyone was thinking, but no one dared articulate, that Hackett's legacy was built on methods that no longer worked, that protecting tradition meant condemning future Marines to inadequate preparation, that institutional pride mattered more than institutional effectiveness. Hackett stood, his chair scraped against floor, loud in the silence. This hearing is to address the negligent discharge incident, not to debate training philosophy. The facts are clear. Contractor Reeves created unsafe conditions. Sergeant Herrera discharged a weapon without authorization. Both represent failures that endanger Marines. My recommendation is immediate dismissal of Contractor Reeves from all Marine Corps facilities. Medical separation for Sergeant Herrera. Termination of this experimental training program. Return to proven methods that have served us for 50 years. Before anyone could respond, Sergeant Michael Rourke stood. His movement was sudden, unexpected. All eyes turned to him. Sir, I need to speak. I need to tell you something. Something that changes everything about this hearing. Hackett looked annoyed. Sit down, Sergeant. This is not the time. No, sir. It is exactly the time, because what I have to say exposes the real failure here. And it is not Contractor Reeves. It is not Sergeant Herrera. It is you. The room exploded into tension. Kowalski moved to intercept Rourke, but Bull raised a hand, stopping him, letting this play out. Explain yourself, Sergeant. Hackett's voice was dangerous, quiet, the tone of a man whose authority had been challenged. Rourke pulled out his phone, opened his email, turned the screen toward Hackett. You sent me here to sabotage Contractor Reeves, to document unsafe practices, to find evidence that would justify shutting down this program. I failed Scout Sniper School deliberately, following your orders. You told me to embed with her students, report everything, build a case that civilian contractors endanger Marines, use any incident as proof that your methods are superior. The phone screen showed emails, dated, detailed, instructions from Hackett to Rourke, promises of advancement, guaranteed placement in future schools, rewards for successful sabotage. You planted an informant in my training program. Victoria's voice was ice. You rigged this from the beginning, ensured failure before we even started. Hackett's face went through several emotions: shock, rage, calculation, finally settling on cold dismissal. Sergeant Rourke is fabricating, trying to deflect from his own failures. Those emails are forged. This is a desperate attempt to avoid responsibility for inadequate performance. They are not forged, sir. Rourke's voice remained steady. I kept every communication, every instruction, every promise you made. I was wrong to follow those orders, wrong to sabotage training that could help Marines. So I am confessing, publicly, accepting whatever disciplinary action comes. But I will not let you destroy this program to protect your legacy. What Contractor Reeves teaches matters. These 8 Marines prove it. We have learned more in 3 weeks than 6 months of traditional training provided. Gunnery Sergeant Webb stood, then Bonelli, then Chen. One by one, the 7 warriors rose. United, silent testimony, brotherhood in action. Colonel Hackett, Webb's voice carried command. Authority earned through decades of service. We are the failures you wrote off, the broken warriors you deemed unsuitable. But in 3 weeks, Contractor Reeves taught us adaptation you never mentioned. She addressed our trauma instead of documenting it as disqualifying. She worked with our limitations instead of dismissing us for having them. If you terminate this program, you are not protecting Marines. You are protecting your reputation at the expense of our careers, our futures, our chance to serve despite being wounded in that service. Captain Vasquez entered the room. The Army Ranger instructor Victoria had met during the initial demonstration. She carried a folder, set it on Hackett's desk. Colonel, I was asked to observe this program and report to MARSOC Command. My findings are documented. Contractor Reeves' methods show measurable improvement in student performance. Her adaptive training addresses real-world combat scenarios that traditional curricula ignore. Her students demonstrate higher stress tolerance and better problem-solving under degraded conditions. This is not opinion, this is data. And the data suggests that your training methods are failing not because students are weaker, but because the training has not evolved to match modern warfare. Hackett looked at the folder, at Vasquez, at the 8 standing warriors, at Rourke holding his phone with damning evidence, at Victoria sitting calm and unmoved, at Bull Cunningham watching everything with those gray seal eyes that missed nothing. The colonel sat back down. When he spoke, his voice had changed, some of the hardness gone, replaced by something else. Weariness, maybe, or recognition, or the first crack in 50 years of certainty. What you are suggesting would require rewriting Marine Corps doctrine, admitting that methods I have spent my career perfecting are inadequate, accepting that a civilian contractor understands something we missed. That is not a small thing. That challenges everything I believe about how we train warriors. I am not asking you to abandon tradition, sir. Victoria's voice softened slightly. I am asking you to build on it. Your fundamentals work. Your discipline works. Your emphasis on marksmanship excellence works. But war evolved. Enemies evolved. Technology evolved. Training must evolve too. Not instead of tradition. On top of it, teaching adaptation alongside fundamentals. Preparing Marines for chaos instead of just perfect conditions. That is not betraying your legacy. That is honoring it by making sure future warriors are prepared for wars you and I will never fight. The room held its breath. Hackett looked older suddenly, the weight of decades visible in the lines of his face, in the gray of his hair, in the eyes that had seen too much. He had built something, believed in something, dedicated his life to passing forward what he knew. And now he was being asked to admit that what he knew was incomplete, that his life's work needed updating. That legacy meant letting go. What do you propose? The words came slowly, carefully, the question of a man who had not yet decided but was willing to listen. Let us finish, Victoria said. 3 more weeks until final qualification. Let these 8 Marines complete their training. Put them through the same test every scout sniper since 1970 has faced. No handicaps, no modifications. If they fail, I leave. You were right. Traditional methods are superior. But if they pass, if even half of them pass, then you consider incorporating adaptive training into your curriculum. Not replacing what you built, enhancing it, evolving it, making it better. And Sergeant Herrera, what happens to him? He continues training, under medical supervision if you require it. But he continues. His PTSD is not disqualifying. It is a wound that needs treatment. You do not discharge Marines for visible wounds. Why discharge them for invisible ones? Hackett looked at Herrera, really looked. Saw the silver star, the bronze star, the purple hearts, saw a warrior who had given everything and was asking only for the chance to continue serving despite wounds received in that service. Master Gunny Kowalski. Hackett's voice was quiet. Your assessment, professional opinion. Can contractor Reeves get these Marines through qualification? Kowalski stood, the chief instructor who had competed against Victoria, who had watched her shoot, who had spent 3 weeks observing from a distance. Sir, I have trained snipers for 15 years. I know what works. I know what does not. Contractor Reeves' methods are unorthodox. Sometimes they make me uncomfortable, but they produce results. Her students show improvement I have not seen in traditional training. They adapt faster, problem solve better, handle stress more effectively. I do not know if they will pass qualification, but I know they have a better chance now than they did 3 weeks ago. And if we are being honest, if we are setting aside pride and looking at data, then we have to admit that something is not working. Pass rates prove it. Combat effectiveness reports prove it. Maybe it is time to try something different, even if that something comes from outside our institution. The words cost him. Victoria could see it. Kowalski was admitting that his methods might be incomplete, that an outsider might have knowledge he lacked. That was not easy for a man who had dedicated his life to mastering his craft. But he said it anyway, because truth mattered more than ego, because Marines mattered more than personal pride. Hackett closed his eyes, sat in silence for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. Finally, he opened them, looked at Victoria. 3 weeks. You have 3 weeks to prepare them for final qualification. Standard Scout Sniper graduation requirements. Cold bore accuracy, unknown distance engagement, stress shoot, fieldcraft. They pass at 90% or higher on all components. No exceptions, no accommodations. If all 8 pass, we discuss curriculum integration. If even one fails, this experiment ends. You leave. We return to traditional methods. Those are the terms. Understood, sir. Victoria stood, extended her hand. Hackett looked at it for a moment, then shook. Firm grip. The handshake of warriors acknowledging each other even in disagreement. The hearing ended. People filed out. The 8 students surrounded Victoria in the hallway. No words, just presence. Solidarity. Proof that 3 weeks had built something that transcended training. Had created a team, a family, a brotherhood that would not break under pressure. Bull pulled Victoria aside. You just committed to an impossible standard. All 8 passing at 90%. That has never been done, not once in the history of this school. I know, Victoria met his eyes. But impossible is what we do, what we have always done. These 8 warriors survived things that should have killed them. They carry wounds that should have broken them. They were dismissed by a system that should have helped them. If they can survive all that, they can pass a qualification test. I just have to make sure they are ready. 3 weeks, Bull said. Make them count. The training intensified. Victoria drove them harder. Longer hours, more stress, more adaptation drills. They shot in rain, in darkness, in wind that made accurate shooting nearly impossible. They engaged targets after sprinting, after carrying heavy loads, after being physically and mentally exhausted. Every evolution designed to simulate combat at its worst. When nothing worked perfectly, when conditions were terrible, when failure meant death. Webb mastered his tremor, learned to time his shots so perfectly that his groups at 1,000 meters rivaled shooters without neurological damage. He became the team leader, the steady presence others looked to when stress mounted. Bonelli developed one-eyed shooting techniques that made him the fastest at unknown distance ranging. He could estimate range more accurately than laser rangefinders, could judge distance by terrain association, and reference objects better than shooters with binocular vision. Chen broke through his paralysis. Not completely, the freeze still came sometimes, but he learned to breathe through it, to acknowledge Jake's ghost and then make David's choices, to honor his brother by being himself. Herrera underwent intensive exposure therapy, controlled noise, gradual desensitization. Washington worked with him, talked him through panic moments, applied medical knowledge to psychological wounds. The PJ medic became Herrera's anchor, his reminder that panic was temporary, that safety was real, that Quantico was not Yemen. Jackson partnered with Sullivan. Youth and experience, strength and wisdom. Together, they solved problems neither could solve alone. She learned from his patience. He learned from her determination. Their combined effectiveness exceeded what either could achieve individually. Washington transformed his medical knowledge into ballistic expertise, started teaching the others, explaining wind drift and bullet drop using medical terminology, dosages and effects, micrograms and minutes of angle. The translation helped everyone understand better, made complex mathematics accessible. Rourke worked hardest of all, trying to make amends, trying to earn trust he had betrayed. He helped everyone, spotted for shooters, critiqued form, shared everything he knew. Slowly, the team accepted him back, forgave what he had done, recognized that confession required more courage than concealment. The days blurred together. Dawn shoots at 0430, classroom work on ballistics and fieldcraft, practical exercises in stalking and hide construction. Evening shoots focusing on stress and adaptation. Every moment used, every minute purposeful. 3 weeks to achieve what 6 months had not. Victoria pushed herself as hard as her students, slept 4 hours a night, spent every waking moment teaching, planning, preparing. She carried the weight of 8 careers, 8 futures, 8 warriors who trusted her to prepare them for a test designed to break people. She could not fail them, would not fail them, had survived 13 deployments to be here in this moment, teaching, passing forward, making Jake's death mean something. The night before qualification, she gathered them together, all 8, sitting in a circle at Range 5, the place where everything had started, where Herrera's accident had nearly ended it all, where they had learned to become a team. Tomorrow you face the test. Victoria's voice was quiet, serious. The same test every Marine Scout sniper since 1970 has faced. Cold bore accuracy at 600, 800, 1,000, 1,200 meters. Unknown distance engagement, stress shoot after exhaustion, fieldcraft and stalking. You need 90% or higher on every component, all 8 of you. That standard has never been met, not once, not ever. She paused. Let the weight settle. But you are not like anyone who came before. You have carried wounds that would have broken others, faced trauma that would have destroyed lesser warriors, been dismissed by a system that should have supported you, and you are still here, still fighting, still refusing to quit. That is not just skill, that is character. That is the kind of strength that cannot be taught, can only be recognized. Webb spoke. We would not be here without you, ma'am. You saw us when others looked away, taught us when others had given up, believed we could adapt when everyone else believed we were broken beyond repair. You were never broken. Victoria shook her head. You were warriors who needed different training, needed someone willing to work with your realities instead of dismissing you for not matching an ideal. Tomorrow you prove that, not to me, not to Hackett, to yourselves. You prove that adaptation is strength, that different is not deficient, that there are many ways to be a warrior. What if we fail? Chen's voice was small. What if after everything we still are not good enough? Then we fail knowing we tried everything. Victoria met his eyes, knowing we pushed as hard as we could, knowing we refused to quit. There is honor in that, dignity in that. But Chen, David, you will not fail. None of you will. Because I have watched you transform over 3 weeks, watched you overcome obstacles that would have stopped anyone else. You are ready, all of you. Trust your training, trust each other, trust that everything we have done has prepared you for this moment. They sat in silence, 8 warriors and 1 instructor, bound by shared struggle, by sweat and stress and the refusal to accept failure. Tomorrow would prove whether adaptation could overcome tradition, whether broken warriors could pass the same test that broke them before, whether Victoria Reeves could teach what the Marine Corps could not. Tomorrow, the word hung in the air, promise and threat, hope and fear, the moment when everything would be decided, when 3 weeks of work would be validated or erased, when 8 warriors would either prove their worth or accept dismissal, when Victoria would either vindicate her grandfather's legacy or confirm Hackett's skepticism. The night deepened, stars emerged, the base settled into evening routine, and somewhere in the darkness, 8 warriors were preparing, checking equipment, reviewing fundamentals, breathing slowly, calming nerves, getting ready for the fight of their lives. Not against an enemy, against a standard, against institutional expectation, against 50 years of doctrine that said they were not good enough, did not belong, could not succeed. Tomorrow they would prove otherwise. or die trying. And for warriors, that was all you could ask. The chance to try big time, the opportunity to prove yourself. The moment when skill and will and absolute refusal to quit would determine everything. Victoria sat alone in her RV, loading her rifle. 8 rounds, 8 names, the ritual that sustained her. But tonight she loaded 9. The 8th round was labeled Herrera, for the Green Beret who deserved better than dismissal. The 9th was labeled Chen, for Jake's brother, for the SEAL who needed to escape his ghost. She whispered their names as each round slid home. Jake, Michael, David Rodriguez, Hassan, Rebecca, Yuri, Sarah, Marcus, Luis, David. Tomorrow those names would either mean something or nothing. Tomorrow she would find out if 3 weeks could overcome 3 months of institutional failure. If adaptation could succeed where tradition had faltered. If 8 broken warriors could pass a test designed for the unbroken. Tomorrow, the final test, the ultimate crucible, the moment when everything would be decided. She set the rifle aside, lay in her narrow bunk, stared at the ceiling. Sleep would not come. Too much riding on tomorrow. Too many lives in the balance. Too much meaning attached to pass or fail. She had survived 13 deployments, made shots that defied physics, operated in conditions that should have killed her, but nothing had prepared her for this. For the weight of 8 careers depending on her teaching, 8 futures resting on whether she had given them enough, prepared them adequately, made them ready. The hours passed slowly. Midnight, 0100, 02. Finally, she gave up on sleep. Rose, made coffee, sat in the darkness and waited for dawn. For the moment when 8 warriors would face their reckoning. When tradition would be tested against adaptation. When the institution would discover whether its methods needed evolution or whether its skepticism had been justified all along. 0430 arrived. Victoria drove to Range 5, found 8 vehicles already parked. All of them, every warrior present, early, ready, prepared to give everything they had. She walked to the firing line and found them waiting. Webb standing tall despite his tremor. Bonelli with his one good eye, Chen breathing slowly, Herrera calm, Jackson determined, Sullivan confident, Washington focused, Rourke ready to make amends. No words were necessary, no speeches required. They had said everything that mattered last night. Now there was only the work, only the test, only the moment when 3 weeks of training would prove sufficient or inadequate, when adaptation would triumph or tradition would be validated. The evaluators arrived. Hackett, Kowalski, Vasquez, Bull, other senior instructors, witnesses to what would unfold, judges of whether impossible had become possible, whether 8 broken warriors could do what no class had done before. Range is hot, Kowalski's voice carried across the morning air. Final qualification begins now. First evolution, cold bore accuracy, 4 distances, 600, 800, 1,000, 1,200 meters. 1 shot per distance, center mass required for pass. Begin when ready. The sun broke the horizon, golden light spilling across Range 5, illuminating 8 warriors and their instructor. 8 people who had refused to quit, who had adapted, who had become more than what they were, who were about to prove that broken could be rebuilt. That failure was not final. That tradition could evolve without being abandoned. The test had begun. The morning sun climbed higher as the first evolution began. Cold bore accuracy, the hardest test of fundamental skill. 4 distances, 4 shots, no siders, no opportunity to adjust based on previous impacts. Just mathematics and muscle memory and the absolute faith that training would overcome nerves. Webb went first, 40 years old, hand tremor from traumatic brain injury. The warrior everyone expected to fail. He settled behind his rifle at the 600-meter line. The tremor was visible, his hands shaking despite every effort to control them. But he had learned. 3 weeks of learning to work with his body instead of against it. He exhaled, found his respiratory pause. The moment between breaths where even damaged nerves settled. His finger took up trigger, slack. The rhythm he had discovered. The pattern his tremor followed. Peak and trough, shake and still. He waited for the trough, for the half-second window when his hands obeyed. The shot broke clean, impact dead center. 600 meters, Perfect cold bore accuracy. Kowalski marked his scorecard. Hit, pass, move to 800 meters. Webb moved to the next firing point. Set up again. Same process, same patience. 800 meters required more calculation, more compensation for wind and distance. But the fundamentals remained. Breathe, wait. Time the shot for when tremor minimized. Second shot, center mass, pass, 1,000 meters. Webb's hands shook harder now. Stress mounting, pressure building. This was where he had failed before, where the tremor had beaten him, where his body had betrayed his skill. But Victoria had taught him something the Marine Corps had not, that working with limitation was stronger than fighting against it. Third shot, 2 inches left of center, still center mass, still a pass, 1,200 meters. The final cold bore shot. Webb took his time, calculated wind, adjusted elevation, felt his tremor cycle, waited for the moment, pressed the trigger during the brief window of stability. Fourth shot, center mass, 4 for 4. Kowalski looked at his scorecard, then at Webb. Something shifted in the Master Gunny's expression. Respect, recognition. The acknowledgement that adaptation had achieved what traditional training could not. Gunnery Sergeant Webb, cold bore accuracy, 100%, pass. Webb stood, walked back to where the others waited, said nothing, just nodded. The confirmation that it was possible, that broken warriors could pass impossible tests, that 3 weeks had been enough. Benelli went next. One-eyed Army Ranger. Depth perception issues, failed range estimation. But he had learned to trust his tools over his instinct, to verify with multiple methods, to use what he had better than others used more. 600 meters. He used his laser rangefinder, confirmed with mil-dot reticle calculation, cross-checked with terrain association. 3 methods, all agreeing. He committed to the data, ignored the doubt that missing binocular vision created. Shot broke, dead center, pass. 800 meters, same process, rangefinder, mil-dots, terrain features, 3 confirmations, 1 shot. Center mass, pass, 1,000 meters, 1,200 meters. Benelli worked through each distance with methodical precision. The precision of a man who had learned that disability could become advantage if you develop compensatory skills to exceptional levels. 4 shots, 4 hits, 100%. Staff Sergeant Benelli, Kowalski's voice carried something new. Not just professional assessment, genuine admiration. Cold bore accuracy, 100%. Pass. That was outstanding shooting for a one-eyed shooter. Chen approached the line, Jake's brother, the SEAL carrying his sibling's ghost. He had frozen during previous attempts, paralyzed by trying to be someone he was not. But 3 weeks had taught him that honoring the dead meant living well, not dying the same death. 600 meters. Chen settled behind his rifle, felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the beginning of paralysis. Jake's face appearing in his mind, but Victoria's voice echoed, "You are not Jake. Make your own choices." He breathed, let the ghost exist without letting it control him, made space for grief without surrendering to it. His finger found the trigger, pressed smoothly. Shot broke, center mass, no hesitation, no freeze, just execution. The subsequent distances fell the same way. 800, 1,000, 1,200, each shot accompanied by Jake's memory, each shot made by David's choice, honoring without imitating, remembering without being consumed. 4 for 4, 100% pass. Petty Officer Chen, Kowalski marked his scorecard. Cold bore accuracy, 100%. Pass. Well done. Herrera stepped to the line, the Green Beret who had nearly been dismissed. The survivor of Yemen, the warrior carrying PTSD that had triggered an accidental discharge 3 weeks ago. This was his redemption, his chance to prove that trauma was not disqualifying, that wounds could heal, that broken could be rebuilt. He set up at 600 meters, rifle positioned, body aligned, breathing controlled. Another shooter chambered around nearby, the metallic sound that had triggered him before. Herrera flinched, tensed, but did not flee, did not panic. Washington was beside him. The PJ medic who had talked him through exposure therapy. "Luis, you are at Quantico. You are safe. Breathe." Herrera breathed. The panic subsided. Not gone, but manageable. He refocused on his target, on the mission, on proving that survival was not just about avoiding triggers, but learning to function despite them. First shot, center mass, pass. The evolution continued. Each distance a test. Each shot an opportunity for PTSD to resurface. But Herrera had tools now. Techniques Victoria had taught. Breathing exercises, grounding methods, the ability to acknowledge fear without surrendering to it. 4 shots, 4 hits, 100%. Sergeant First Class Herrera. Kowalski's voice was gentle, almost kind. Cold bore accuracy, 100%. Pass. Outstanding work overcoming your challenges. Jackson shot next. The only woman, the Marine who had faced harassment, who had been dismissed for lack of upper body strength. She had learned team tactics, how to work with partners, how to use bone support instead of muscle, how to make smaller stature an advantage through better positioning. 4 shots, 4 hits, pass. Sullivan followed, 45 years old, the oldest, the one who had doubted himself, who had believed age was disqualifying. But 3 weeks had taught him that experience mattered, that patience was strength, that decades of life provided advantages youth could not match. 4 shots, 4 hits, pass. Washington stepped up, the PJ medic, the excellent combat lifesaver who had struggled with long-range shooting, but he had learned to translate medical knowledge into ballistic calculation, to treat wind drift and bullet drop like dosages, to apply precision from one domain to another. 4 shots, 4 hits, pass. Rourke went last, the informant, the saboteur who had confessed, who was trying to earn redemption through performance. He shot perfectly. 4 for 4. Proof that his previous failure had been deliberate, that he possessed skill he had hidden to serve Hackett's agenda. Kowalski tallied the scorecards, looked at Hackett, then at Victoria, then at the 8 warriors standing together. Phase 1 complete. Cold bore accuracy. 8 shooters, all 8 100%. 100% pass rate. That has never happened. Not once in the history of this school. Hackett's face was unreadable. He said nothing, just gestured for Kowalski to continue. Phase 2, unknown distance engagement. The evaluators moved the targets, set them at a distance the students did not know, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 meters. The shooters would have to estimate range using reticle measurements, terrain association, reference objects, any method except laser rangefinders which were prohibited for this evolution. 1 shot, 3 minutes maximum from target identification to impact. Miss and you fail. Webb went first. He studied the target through his scope, measured it using mil-dot reticle, a human-sized silhouette, approximately 6 feet tall. He calculated. Target measures 1.4 mils. Formula gives 1,340 meters. He added 50 meters for mirage distortion, a trick Victoria had taught, atmospheric conditions that made targets appear closer than reality. He shot for 1,390 meters, impact 6 inches low, still center mass, pass. Bonelli used multiple methods, measured the target, studied terrain features, identified a tree near the target as approximately 20 feet tall, cross-referenced both calculations, arrived at 1,315 meters, added 30 meters for terrain slope, shot for 1,345 meters. Impact, dead center, perfect hit. Kowalski shook his head in disbelief. That is the best unknown distance shot I have seen in 5 years, from a one-eyed shooter. The evolution continued, each warrior using techniques Victoria had taught. Chen estimated 1,350 meters, hit center mass. Herrera calculated 1,340, hit center mass. Jackson used team consultation. Asked Sullivan for his estimate, split the difference, hit center mass. Washington treated it like trauma medicine. Best guess confirmed with second opinion. Hit center mass. Rourke shot perfectly. Sullivan used decades of terrain reading experience. Dead center hit. 8 shooters, 8 hits. 100% pass rate on unknown distance. Kowalski looked at Hackett again. Sir, this is unprecedented. They are performing at levels exceeding our best graduates. Phase 3. Hackett's voice was tight, controlled. Stress, shoot, begin. The stress evolution was designed to break warriors. 400-meter sprint in full gear, 100 burpees, immediate engagement of 1,000-meter target, 60-second time limit from end of burpees to shot fired. Most students failed here. Heart rate too high, muscles too fatigued, breathing too ragged. Precision impossible under extreme physical stress. Webb ran first, 40 years old, older than everyone except Sullivan. The sprint nearly broke him. The burpees pushed him to his limit. He approached his rifle with heart rate exceeding 180 beats per minute, hands shaking from exertion and neurological damage, vision tunneling, every muscle screaming. But he had trained for this. Victoria had made them shoot after exhaustion, had created artificial stress conditions, had taught them that combat rarely provided perfect circumstances, that warriors had to perform when everything was wrong. Webb controlled his breathing, found his rhythm despite the chaos in his body, timed his shot for when hands stilled between heartbeats and tremor cycles. 58 seconds, shot broke, center mass, pass. He collapsed after the shot. Medic checked him, cleared him to continue. Webb stood slowly, walked back to his team, face gray with exhaustion but eyes bright with accomplishment. Benelli ran faster, finished burpees quicker, but his one-eyed vision blurred from fatigue, depth perception worse when physically stressed. He used Victoria's backup method. Trust the feel, listen to wind, let muscle memory guide when eyes failed. 55 seconds, center mass, pass. Chen ran the fastest, SEAL conditioning showing. But approaching the rifle brought flashback. Jake dying, rooftop in Syria, the moment when everything went wrong. Victoria's voice shouted from the spectator area. David, you are not on that rooftop. You are at Quantico. Jake chose his death. You choose your life. Hackett moved to silence her. Bull held up a hand, stopping him, letting this play out. Chen snapped out of the flashback. 30 seconds left. Rapid setup. Breathing control. Shot broke at 59 seconds. Center mass. Pass. Herrera's run was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The Green Beret whose PTSD had nearly ended everything. He sprinted, completed burpees, approached his rifle. Washington racked his bolt loudly, the sound that had triggered Herrera before, the metallic clack that brought back Yemen. Herrera flinched, tensed. 40 seconds left, but he did not flee, did not panic, did not abandon the rifle. He applied the techniques, breathing, grounding, acknowledging the fear and continuing anyway. 30 seconds. He settled behind the scope, found his target, calculated holds. 20 seconds. Controlled breathing. 10 seconds. Trigger press. 5 seconds remaining. Shot broke. Center mass. Pass. The watching Marines erupted in applause. Broke protocol. Did not care. They had just witnessed a warrior overcome trauma in real time. Had seen PTSD managed instead of defeating. Had watched adaptation triumph over limitation. Herrera collapsed. Not from exhaustion. From emotional release. 2 years of carrying Yemen. 2 years of being told he was broken. Unfit. Unsuitable. And in 60 seconds he had proven otherwise. Had shown that trauma did not define him, did not disqualify him, was just another obstacle to overcome. The remaining shooters completed their evolutions. Jackson, Sullivan, Washington, Rourke, each one passing, each one proving that 3 weeks had prepared them, that Victoria's methods worked, that adaptation was not weakness but strength. 8 shooters, 8 passes, 100% on stress shoot. Kowalski stopped tallying, looked at Hackett with an expression that mixed disbelief with recognition. Sir, 3 evolutions, 24 total scores, 24 passes, 100%. This is impossible. This does not happen. Yet it is happening. Bull Cunningham spoke for the first time. Because these warriors were trained differently, taught adaptation instead of just mechanics, prepared for chaos instead of just perfect conditions. Maybe that is the lesson here. Hackett said nothing, just watched. His face a mask, 50 years of certainty being challenged by 3 weeks of different methods. His life's work being questioned by results he could not deny. Final evolution. Hackett's voice was flat. Fieldcraft, stalking and hide construction. You will stalk 800 meters through open terrain. Construct camouflaged hides. Remain undetected for 2 hours while evaluators attempt to locate you. Then engage 600-meter targets from your hides. Standard Scout Sniper final evolution. Begin. The students paired up. Webb with Benelli, Chen with Washington, Herrera with Jackson, Sullivan with Rourke. They moved into the field. disappearing into vegetation and terrain that seemed too sparse to hide a man. But Victoria had taught them Israeli techniques, using natural depressions, minimal equipment, patience over haste. 2 hours passed. Evaluators walked the field. Kowalski, other senior instructors, scanning with binoculars and spotting scopes, looking for any sign of the 8 warriors hidden somewhere in 800 meters of Virginia scrub. They found no one. 2 hours expired. Kowalski called time. Shooters revealed positions and engaged targets. 8 warriors materialized from terrain that had seemed empty, rising from hides so well constructed that evaluators had walked within 10 meters without detecting them. Each pair shot at their designated targets, 600 meters. 8 shots, 8 hits, perfect fieldcraft scores. Kowalski gathered the scorecards, tallied the final numbers. His hand shook slightly as he wrote. When he finished, he looked at the paper for a long moment, then at Hackett, then at Victoria, then at the 8 warriors standing in a line, exhausted, dirty, triumphant. Final scores. He read from the scorecard, his voice carrying across the range to where everyone could hear. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Webb, cold bore accuracy 100%, unknown distance 100%, stress shoot pass, fieldcraft pass, overall score 97%, pass with honors. Staff Sergeant Anthony Benelli, 100% cold bore, perfect unknown distance, stress shoot pass, fieldcraft pass, overall 98%, pass with honors. Petty Officer First Class David Chen, perfect cold bore, unknown distance pass, stress shoot pass, fieldcraft pass, overall 96%, pass with honors. He continued through all 8 names, each score above 90%, each warrior passing, each one exceeding the standard that had broken them before. When he finished, Kowalski set down the scorecards, looked at Hackett. Sir, 8 students, all 8 passed, average score 96.5%. Historical average for Scout Sniper School is 41% pass rate. This class achieved 100%, with scores exceeding most graduates. This is the highest performing class in the history of this institution. The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone processing what had just happened. 8 failures had become 8 successes. 8 warriors deemed unsuitable had proven suitable. 3 weeks of contractor training had produced results that 6 months of traditional training could not. Hackett stood slowly, walked to where the 8 warriors stood, studied each face, saw exhaustion and pride, and the fierce joy of proving everyone wrong. Finally, he spoke. This is not what I expected, not what I wanted. For 50 years, I believed our methods were the right methods, the only methods. I believed tradition was sacred, that changing doctrine was betrayal. But you 8 have shown me something, shown me that tradition without evolution is stagnation, that honoring the past means building on it, not replicating it. He turned to Victoria. Contractor Reeves, you did what we could not. Took 8 Marines we had given up on and made them into warriors, not by replacing fundamentals, by teaching them to adapt, to work with their realities instead of fighting against them. That is not traditional Marine Corps methodology, but it works, the scores prove it, and I am enough of a warrior to recognize when I am wrong. He extended his hand. Victoria shook it. The handshake lasted longer this time, the grip of 2 professionals acknowledging each other, respecting each other, finding common ground despite different paths. Effective immediately, Hackett continued. The Scout Sniper School will incorporate adaptive training into our curriculum. Contractor Reeves will serve as permanent civilian instructor. She will work with Master Gunny Kowalski to redesign our advanced training programs. We will blend traditional fundamentals with adaptive techniques, create a curriculum that prepares Marines for modern warfare while maintaining the standards that have served us for 5 decades. He paused, looked at each of the 8 warriors. And these 8 Marines will serve as assistant instructors. They have lived both sides of this training, know what works and what does not. They will help teach future students. Pass forward what they learn. Make sure no other Marine is dismissed for being different when different could be strength. Webb stepped forward. Sir, we are honored, but some of us have medical conditions, limitations. Are you certain you want us as instructors? I am certain I want warriors who overcame impossible odds. Hackett's voice was firm, who refused to quit when quitting made sense, who proved that adaptation is not weakness, but strength. That is what we need to teach. Not just marksmanship, character, resilience, the absolute refusal to accept failure. You 8 embody that, and every future scout sniper needs to learn it. The ceremony concluded. The 8 warriors were officially graduated as scout snipers, receiving certificates that had seemed impossible 3 weeks ago, standing as proof that broken could be rebuilt, that the system could learn, that change was possible even in institutions built on tradition. 6 months later, Victoria stood on the range at Quantico watching the latest Scout Sniper class graduate. 32 students, 24 passed, 75% pass rate, up from 34% before the curriculum changed. The numbers told the story. Adaptation worked. Evolution was necessary. Progress was real. The Tombstone 8 stood with her, all serving as assistant instructors. Webb teaching tremor management and working with physical limitations. Bonelli instructing one-eyed shooting techniques and adaptive ranging methods. Chen helping students overcome psychological barriers. Herrera running PTSD, awareness, and stress management programs. Jackson teaching team tactics and partnered operations. Sullivan mentoring older students and sharing the wisdom of experience. Washington translating medical knowledge into ballistic education. Rourke earning back trust through dedication and honest teaching. Bull Cunningham approached. Retirement in 3 months, but still serving. Still watching over the program he had helped create. They are calling you the ghost instructor. He smiled. The contractor who revolutionized Scout Sniper School. Your grandfather would be proud. Bobby Reeves taught me to shoot. Victoria watched the graduates celebrate. Uncle Tommy taught me to serve. But these 8 warriors taught me what matters most. That legacy is not about what you accomplish. It is about what you pass forward. About making sure the next generation has every advantage, every tool, every piece of knowledge that might keep them alive. Her phone buzzed. Message from JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, requesting her services for a 90-day deployment to Poland, training Ukrainian military instructors in advanced marksmanship, teaching them to teach others, passing the knowledge forward again. I have to go, she showed Bull the message. 3 months in Poland, training trainers, making sure what we learned here spreads further. What about the program here? The 8 can run it. They know everything I know, maybe more. They lived the transformation, can teach it better than I can. This was never about me anyway. It was about proving that adaptation works, that broken can heal, that institutions can change. Mission accomplished. When do you leave? 2 weeks. Then we have time for one more thing. Bull pulled out a folder. Marine Corps Commandant wants to meet you, wants to expand this program to all Marine sniper training. Not just Scout Sniper School, every level, every command, teaching adaptation as a core skill. Victoria took the folder. Read the orders. The scope was massive. Curriculum redesign across the entire Marine Corps sniper community. Permanent institutional change. Her methods becoming doctrine. Bobby Reeves' legacy spreading to thousands of Marines who would never know his name, but would benefit from his teaching. I will do it, but only if the 8 are co-designers. This is their program as much as mine. Their experience that makes it work. They deserve equal credit. Agreed, Bull nodded. One more thing. David Chen asked me to give you something. He handed her an envelope. She opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, old. The paper yellowed with age. Jake's last letter. Bull explained. He wrote it before his final mission. His estate lawyer held it, released it to David last month. David wanted you to have it. Victoria unfolded the letter carefully. Read words written by a ghost, by the man whose name she had whispered every morning for 2 years. The letter was short, direct, Jake's voice clear even through paper and ink. Vic, if you are reading this, then I am gone. Made a choice that cost me everything. But I want you to know it was the right choice. 12 lives for 1, that math works. That is warrior math. You hesitated because you are good, because you cared, because you tried to save me. Do not let that haunt you. Let it guide you. Keep training others. Keep trying to bring people home alive. Keep being the warrior who hesitates before pulling the trigger. We need more of that, not less. Do not let them waste this. Make my death mean something. Teach the next generation. Pass it forward. That is the mission. That is what matters, Jake. Victoria folded the letter, returned it to the envelope. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were wet. 2 years of carrying Jake, of whispering his name, of loading rounds and making shots and trying to understand what he meant. And now she knew. She had known all along. The mission was teaching, passing forward, making sure future warriors learned from past mistakes, from past sacrifices, from the price others paid. Thank you. She handed the envelope back to Bull. Tell David I understand now. Tell him his brother's death purchased something real, something lasting. Tell him every Marine who learns adaptive training is learning something Jake died to protect. That is legacy. That is honor. That is what makes sacrifice meaningful. Bull took the envelope, nodded, both of them understanding what words could not quite capture. The weight of carrying the dead, the responsibility of surviving, the mission that never ended, teaching, passing forward, making sure the next generation had every advantage. The ceremony concluded, students dispersed, the 8 assistant instructors gathered around Victoria. A final moment together before she deployed to Poland, before they continued the work without her, before the program became truly theirs. We would not be here without you. Webb spoke for all of them. You saw us when others looked away, taught us when others had quit, made us believe adaptation was possible when everyone said we were broken beyond repair. You were never broken. Victoria met each of their eyes in turn. You were warriors who needed different training, who needed someone willing to work with your realities. But you did the work. You adapted. You overcame. You proved that failure is not final. That was all you. I just showed you the path. You walked it. What happens now? Chen asked. After Poland, after Ukraine, what is your mission? The same mission it has always been. Teaching, passing forward, making sure warriors have every advantage, every skill, every piece of knowledge that might keep them alive. Bobby Reeves taught me, I taught you. You will teach the next generation. That is how legacy works. That is how we honor the dead, by keeping the living alive. She gathered her rifle case, the Barrett that had accompanied her through 13 deployments, through 2 years of morning rituals, through 3 weeks of transforming failures into successes. The tool that had defined her life, but it was just a tool, just steel and carbon fiber. What mattered was what you did with it, who you taught, what you passed forward. The 8 warriors stood together, united, brotherhood forged in shared struggle, in 3 weeks of refusing to quit, in the absolute determination to prove the system wrong. They had succeeded, had proven adaptation worked, had shown that broken could become whole, that tradition could evolve without being abandoned. Victoria drove away from Quantico that evening, the RV lumbering down Virginia highways, heading toward Poland, toward the next mission, toward the next group of warriors who needed to learn what she knew, what Bobby had taught her, what Tommy had died defending, what Jake had made her promise to pass forward. She stopped at a rest area as the sun set, walked to a quiet spot, pulled out her rifle, loaded 9 rounds, 8 for the ghosts she would always carry, Jake, Michael, David Rodriguez, Hassan, Rebecca, Yuri, Sarah, Marcus, and 1 more. 1 for the living, for herself, for the warrior who had survived, who had found purpose, who had learned that legacy was not about dying heroically. It was about teaching others to live well. She whispered the names as each round loaded, the ritual that had sustained her, that had given structure to grief, that had transformed pain into purpose. Tomorrow she would fly to Poland, would teach Ukrainian instructors, would pass the knowledge forward again, would continue the mission that never ended. But tonight she stood in a Virginia rest area and fired 9 rounds at the sunset. 8 for the dead, 1 for the living. And for the first time in 2 years, the weight felt different. Not lighter, never lighter, but balanced, carried properly, distributed across shoulders strong enough to bear it, shared with the Tombstone 8 who would carry it forward, passed to future generations who would learn from it. The shots echoed across empty fields. 9 rounds fired, 9 names honored, 9 promises kept. The rifle fell silent. Victoria packed it carefully, returned it to its case. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, new opportunities to teach. But tonight was for remembering, for acknowledging what had been lost, for celebrating what had been found, for recognizing that sometimes the hardest shot was not the longest, was not the most precise, was not the one that killed enemies. Sometimes the hardest shot was the one you did not take, the one where you taught someone else to shoot instead, where you passed the rifle to the next generation and trusted them to continue the mission, to carry the legacy, to honor the dead by keeping the living alive. Victoria drove into the night, the RV carrying her toward airports and deployments and training ranges in distant countries, toward warriors who needed what she knew, toward the endless mission of teaching, of passing forward, of making sure Bobby Reeves and Tommy Reeves and Jake Chen and all the others had not died for nothing, had purchased something real, something lasting, something worth the price they paid. 3 generations of warriors, 3 different wars, but the same fundamental truth. That legacy was not what you accomplished alone. It was what you taught others, what you passed forward, what you left behind that continued after you were gone. Bobby had taught Victoria. Victoria had taught the 8. The 8 would teach thousands, and those thousands would teach millions. That was how knowledge spread, how wisdom accumulated, how the sacrifice of the few purchased protection for the many. The road stretched ahead, dark, uncertain, full of challenges she could not anticipate. But Victoria drove forward anyway, because that was what warriors did. They continued mission. They adapted. They overcame. They refused to quit even when quitting made sense. They taught the next generation. They passed the torch. They made sure the light never went out. And sometimes in quiet moments on dark roads, they whispered names, loaded 9 rounds, fired at sunsets, honored ghosts, and promised to continue, to teach, to pass forward, to make sure that everyone who came before had not sacrificed in vain, that their deaths purchased life, that their legacy lived on in warriors they would never meet, in shots they would never take, in lives saved by knowledge passed through generations. Victoria drove into the night. The ghosts rode with her, but they were not haunting anymore. They were guiding, teaching, reminding her that the mission never ended, that legacy was ongoing, that every warrior who learned to adapt was learning something purchased with blood, with sacrifice, with the absolute refusal to let death be meaningless. The road stretched ahead. Victoria drove, and somewhere ahead, waiting in the darkness, was the next sunrise, the next range, the next group of warriors, the next opportunity to teach, the next chance to pass forward what mattered, the next moment to make sure that legacy lived. That sacrifice meant something, that the last good shot was not the one that killed, but the one that taught others to live. She drove toward that future, carrying the past, living the present, building the bridge between what was and what would be. That was legacy. That was honor. That was the mission that never ended. And Victoria Reeves, 3 generations removed from Bobby, 1 generation removed from Tommy, 1 lifetime removed from Jake, would continue it, would teach it, would pass it forward, until the day came when she too became a ghost, and someone else loaded rounds in her memory and promised to continue, to teach, to make sure the legacy lived. That was enough. That was everything. That was the last good shot. Brothers and sisters, Victoria's story hits different, doesn't it? 3 generations of warriors, 1 impossible mission, turning 8 failures into champions. But here's what keeps me up at night. How many Webbs, Herreras, and Chens did we lose because the system couldn't adapt? Victoria learned what Bobby taught in Korea, what Tommy died proving in Mogadishu. That legacy isn't about perfect shots. It's about passing the torch to shaking hands. One-eyed rangers and PTSD survivors who refuse to quit. Question for you warriors out there. Have you ever been written off by the system, only to prove them wrong later? Or maybe you trained someone everyone else gave up on. Drop your story below. I read every single comment. And if this one resonated, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories about warriors who adapted when doctrine failed them.